Silent treatment. The silent treatment is a chilling manipulation tactic that masquerades as harmless distance, but in reality, it's a weapon designed to punish, control, and diminish. At its core, the silent treatment is the deliberate withdrawal of communication, affection, or acknowledgement, used not to create space for healing, but to induce pain and submission. It's the emotional equivalent of being locked in a dark room, left screaming for validation that never comes. When someone uses silence as a weapon, they're not just refusing to talk. They are erasing your existence, ignoring your words, your emotions, your presence, as if you vanished. You beg for a response. You replay the last conversation, searching for what you did wrong. Your anxiety skyrockets because silence becomes deafening. This is exactly what the manipulator wants: control through confusion and desperation. The silent treatment isn't a break, it's psychological warfare. It conditions you to associate emotional safety with obedience. Speak your truth, get ignored. Set a boundary, get punished with silence. Slowly, you learn to suppress your needs, your feelings, your very voice, just to avoid the cold void of being treated like you're nothing. This tactic can be even more damaging than overt conflict. Words can hurt, yes, but absence, that intentional void, it hollows out the heart. Victims of the silent treatment often report feelings of abandonment, low self-worth, and even emotional paralysis. The cruelty lies in its invisibility. There are no bruises, no shouting, only silence, heavy and cruel, echoing louder than any scream. And somehow, you're the one left apologizing. Guilt tripping. Guilt tripping is a manipulative tactic that cloaks itself in emotional sensitivity but hides a venomous intent to control through shame. It is the calculated act of making someone feel responsible for another person's emotions, disappointment, or suffering, even when they've done nothing wrong. The manipulator weaves guilt into every interaction like a thread, stitching shame into your conscience until you can no longer distinguish your own feelings from their judgment. It begins subtly: a sigh, a look, a quiet, "I guess I just expected more from you." Suddenly, your choices feel selfish, your boundaries feel cruel, your happiness starts to carry the weight of someone else's sadness. "After all I've done for you," they say, their words laced with martyrdom. They cast themselves as the eternal victim, selfless, wounded, and betrayed, while you become the ungrateful villain. You cancel plans you were excited for. You give more than you can afford. You silence your own needs to avoid the crushing weight of their disappointment. Over time, your life becomes a balancing act of obligation and emotional debt. Guilt tripping is not love. It's not care. It's coercion wrapped in a fragile voice and tearful eyes. The worst part is how invisible it feels. To outsiders, the manipulator may seem wounded, even kind, but behind closed doors, they wield guilt like a blade, subtle, sharp, and devastatingly effective. You're not being asked, you're being forced, emotionally blackmailed into submission, and as you shrink under the pressure to make things right, the manipulator grows stronger, feeding off your remorse like fuel. Gaslighting is one of the most insidious and psychologically destructive manipulation tactics known. It is the systematic act of making someone question their own memory, perception, or sanity, slowly eroding their confidence until they no longer trust themselves. What makes gaslighting so dangerous is that it doesn't happen all at once. It's a slow, calculated erosion of reality designed to destabilize and control the victim. At first, it might seem innocent, a small denial here, a forgotten detail there. "I never said that," the manipulator insists, even though you clearly remember them saying it. "You're being too sensitive," they add when you react with emotion. Bit by bit, they twist your understanding of events, rewrite history, and make you believe you're overreacting or imagining things. It's not just lying, it's strategic, psychological warfare. The goal is to make you dependent on the manipulator for a sense of reality. Over time, you find yourself apologizing for things you didn't do, doubting your every thought, and walking on eggshells. You become terrified of making a mistake, not because you fear being wrong, but because you no longer believe you're capable of knowing what's right. This internal collapse is what gives the manipulator complete control. They become the authority of your world. What's true, what's not, what's real, what's imagined. Gaslighting isn't just manipulation, it's a silent annihilation of the self. Victims often suffer anxiety, depression, and a profound sense of isolation. And the most chilling part? They often don't even realize it's happening until they've lost themselves completely. Love bombing. Love bombing is a seductive and blinding manipulation tactic that disguises itself as deep affection, but beneath the surface lies a calculated plan to overwhelm, disarm, and control. It starts like a dream: intense compliments, constant communication, extravagant gifts, dramatic declarations. "I've never felt this way before. You're everything I've ever wanted." In days or weeks, it feels like destiny. It's intoxicating, overwhelming, and it's not real. This isn't genuine love. It's a trap. The manipulator floods you with affection, not to build a bond, but to create dependency. They mirror your desires, anticipate your needs, and make you feel like you found someone who finally sees you. You let your guard down. You trust them. And just when you're fully invested, they begin to withdraw, criticize, or control. What was once, "I can't live without you," becomes, "You're lucky I stay with you." The pedestal turns into a cage. Love bombing isn't about love. It's about power. It creates an emotional high so potent that when the affection is suddenly pulled away, you do anything to get it back. The manipulator becomes the source of both euphoria and pain, and you're trapped in a cycle of craving what they once gave so freely. It's not love when it's used to confuse, conquer, and break your sense of reality. Victims of love bombing often feel foolish, wondering how they didn't see it sooner. But that's the danger. It feels so good in the beginning, you don't realize you're being hunted, not held. Triangulation. Triangulation is a sinister manipulation tactic that turns relationships into battlegrounds, not by direct attack, but by pulling a third person into the dynamic to create jealousy, insecurity, and division. It's the emotional equivalent of psychological warfare designed to keep you off balance, questioning your worth, and fighting for the manipulator's approval. Instead of addressing conflict directly, they recruit an outsider, an ex, a friend, even a stranger, to silently compete with you in the shadows. It starts subtly. They mention how someone else never treated them this way, or how a coworker really gets them. Suddenly, you're no longer enough. Your value is now measured against someone else you didn't even invite into the relationship. You begin to chase. You feel threatened. You wonder what you did wrong. And that's exactly what the manipulator wants. Control through comparison. Triangulation isn't just emotional sabotage. It's psychological cruelty. It fractures your sense of security and creates a toxic arena where love becomes performance. You feel like you're always being judged, never measuring up, constantly working to regain what was once given freely. Over time, your confidence erodes. You start resenting the third person, even though they're just a pawn. The real puppet master sits quietly, feeding off your pain, pleased with the chaos they've orchestrated. The cruelest part? The third person often has no idea they're being used. It's not about them, it's about your reaction. The manipulator stirs the pot, then steps back, watching the fallout with twisted satisfaction. Triangulation isn't just manipulation, it's emotional terrorism disguised as innocent conversation. Playing the victim is a sinister manipulation tactic that disguises power as helplessness. The manipulator doesn't attack directly. They shift blame, distort narratives, and position themselves as the wounded party, all to gain sympathy, avoid accountability, and control the emotional tone of any relationship or conflict. It's not just self-pity, it's a performance crafted to manipulate others into protecting, excusing, or prioritizing them, no matter the truth. They cry before you can confront them. They turn every confrontation into a pity story. Suddenly, you're the aggressor for daring to express hurt. "You're always against me," they'll whisper, tears in their eyes, making you feel like a monster for setting a boundary. The goal is to flip the power dynamic. If they're the victim, you can't be one too. This tactic is especially brutal because it recruits others into the illusion. Friends, family, even therapists may be fooled into believing the manipulator is genuinely mistreated. You become the villain in a story you didn't write. You feel isolated, invalidated, and slowly begin to doubt your own sense of justice. Their wounds, real or fabricated, become weapons that silence yours. The true cruelty lies in how playing the victim silences those who are actually hurting. Real victims are made invisible, while manipulators soak in unearned empathy. And the more compassion they receive, the stronger their mask becomes. You're left defending yourself against ghosts, accusations that never made sense, emotions that were never yours to carry. And while you unravel in confusion, they stand in the spotlight, tragically misunderstood, perfectly in control. Intermittent reinforcement. Intermittent reinforcement is one of the most addictive and emotionally torturous manipulation tactics ever used. It operates like a psychological slot machine, delivering affection, approval, or validation in unpredictable bursts, keeping you hooked by the mere possibility that love might return. One moment you're everything, the next you're invisible. One day you're adored, the next you're ignored. And the scariest part? It works. Not in spite of the inconsistency, but because of it. In healthy relationships, love is steady and predictable, but with intermittent reinforcement, the manipulator conditions you to crave their attention by making it scarce, erratic, and random. You become addicted to the highs, the texts that finally come after silence, the compliments after days of criticism, the sudden tenderness after cruelty. You start working harder, not because you're being rewarded, but because you're desperately chasing that fleeting moment of closeness. This cycle hijacks your brain's reward system. Each unexpected act of kindness floods your body with relief and dopamine. You feel seen again, valued, wanted, and then it's gone. Silence returns, or punishment, or coldness, but you stay because now you believe that if you just try harder, behave better, love more, they'll give you that warmth again. It's not love, it's emotional conditioning. It's why victims of abuse often stay, not because they're weak, but because they're wired to wait for the next high. And the manipulator knows this. They control your emotions like a puppeteer, giving just enough to keep you dancing and withholding just enough to keep you desperate. This is not affection. It's captivity disguised as hope. Emotional blackmail. Emotional blackmail is the ruthless art of using your love, fear, or guilt against you. It's a manipulation tactic that turns your deepest emotions into levers for control, where every interaction feels like walking through a minefield of threats, ultimatums, and consequences cloaked in affection. At its core, emotional blackmail says, if you don't do what I want, you'll suffer, or worse, I will. The manipulator doesn't need to scream. They just say things like, if you really love me, you do this, or fine, don't help me. I guess I'll just figure it out alone, if I make it. It's a weaponized kind of vulnerability, one that traps you in a cycle of appeasement. You don't give in because you agree. You give in because you're terrified of the emotional fallout. What makes emotional blackmail so devastating is its intimacy. The person using it often knows exactly where to strike. They twist your loyalty into obligation, your empathy into chains. You say yes when you want to say no. You keep the peace at the cost of your own. And every time you surrender, They learn just how easy it is to control you with a well-timed tear, a cold silence, or a single sentence filled with guilt. It isn't love, it's emotional extortion. And while it may look like concern on the outside, what it demands is complete submission. You're no longer in a relationship. You're in a hostage situation where your freedom is always conditional and your heart is the price of your compliance. Stonewalling is the brutal art of shutting someone out, not with yelling or insults, but with silence, blank stares, and emotional barricades so cold they make you question if you ever mattered at all. It is the intentional refusal to engage, communicate, or acknowledge another person's feelings, needs, or presence. It's not about needing space, it's about power. Stonewalling says, "You don't exist right now, and I don't owe you anything." The pain of stonewalling cuts deep because it leaves no bruises, only an agonizing emptiness. You try to explain, you try to connect, you cry, whisper, beg, anything to get a response. But the manipulator won't look at you, won't speak, won't flinch. You're met with a wall so impenetrable, it makes you feel invisible. And that's the point. This is not conflict resolution. It's emotional punishment. Over time, this tactic erodes the soul. It makes you feel unworthy of resolution, of love, of basic human dignity. You begin to shrink, fearing every disagreement will result in being frozen out. You start censoring yourself, tiptoeing around truth just to avoid the agonizing silence that follows any perceived offense. Stonewalling is psychological abandonment in real time. It's how manipulators gain the upper hand by weaponizing indifference. You can't argue with silence. You can't reason with a void. You're forced into emotional isolation, left to carry the weight of the entire relationship on your shoulders. And while they sit in silence, you unravel, because nothing screams "you don't matter" louder than someone who chooses to ignore your pain while watching you drown in it. A passive-aggressive behavior. Passive-aggressive behavior is manipulation wrapped in politeness, where the intent to harm is masked by the appearance of civility. It is the covert expression of anger, resentment, or control through subtle digs, backhanded compliments, procrastination, and strategic forgetfulness. Rather than confronting directly, the passive aggressor punishes quietly, leaving confusion in their wake while maintaining plausible deniability. They'll say, "I'm fine," when they're clearly not. "I was just joking," after a cruel remark. "Oh, I forgot," when they conveniently leave out something important. Again, every comment, every action carries a sharp edge disguised as carelessness or wit. They make you feel foolish for being hurt. If you speak up, you're accused of overreacting. If you stay quiet, the tension swells until it drowns you. This behavior thrives on imbalance. The manipulator gets to express hostility without taking responsibility for it, while you're left questioning whether you imagined the sting. It's emotional warfare with no battleground, just 1,000 paper cuts that no one else sees. And the worst part? Their behavior often makes you look like the problem. Your frustration builds, and when you finally explode, they play the innocent one, shaking their head as if you're the unstable one. Passive aggressiveness is cowardly, cruel, and corrosive. It denies others the honesty they deserve and replaces genuine dialogue with toxic games. It suffocates trust, poisons communication, and chips away at your sense of emotional safety until you're second-guessing every sentence, every silence, every smile. And still, they'll say with a smirk, "What did I do?" Blame-shifting is a corrosive manipulation tactic that twists accountability into a weapon, turning every conflict, mistake, or misstep back onto you. No matter what the manipulator does, lie, cheat, lash out, it will always somehow be your fault. They never apologize. They never own their behavior. Instead, they deflect, distort, and redirect until you're the one feeling guilty for the very thing they did to you. It's subtle at first. You express hurt, and they say, "Well, if you hadn't acted that way, I wouldn't have done it. You question their words, and they accuse you of being too sensitive, dramatic, or always looking for a problem. Suddenly, you're the aggressor. You're the one who needs to change. The real issue vanishes beneath a fog of manipulation, and you're left defending yourself for having feelings. Blame shifting is not just about avoiding responsibility, it's about domination. It's psychological sleight of hand that leaves you confused, ashamed, and emotionally disoriented. You begin to second-guess your instincts. You apologize for things that aren't yours to carry. Over time, your sense of justice, of what's fair or right, becomes warped under the weight of their distortions. The manipulator paints themselves as the misunderstood victim, always reacting, never initiating. And you're the one who has to walk on eggshells, anticipating their needs while burying your own. Blame shifting robs you of your voice and replaces it with guilt, and the more you absorb, the less they ever have to grow. In the end, you're left holding a mirror full of their sins, while they walk away spotless. Denying the truth. Denying the truth is a manipulation tactic rooted in psychological dominance, where the manipulator deliberately rejects facts, evidence, or reality itself to maintain control over perception and power. It's more than lying. It's an erasure of your lived experience, a brutal rewriting of what you saw, heard, and felt. The goal isn't just to hide the truth, it's to destroy your confidence in ever knowing it. You show them the messages, they say they never sent them. You remind them of promises, they swear they never made them. You bring up past arguments, they claim they never happened. Each denial feels like a crack in your sanity. You begin to ask yourself, did I mishear? Am I being too sensitive? Maybe I really did get it wrong. This is exactly the outcome they want. If they can control your reality, they can control you. What makes this tactic so psychologically damaging is its persistence. It's not a one-time deflection. It's a pattern, a method of slowly unraveling your grasp on what's real. Over time, you stop trusting your memory, your judgment, even your senses. You become dependent on their version of events because yours has been invalidated beyond repair. They don't need to win the argument. They just need to make you question the ground you're standing on. And the more you chase the truth, the more they twist it until you no longer recognize what's real. Denying the truth isn't just deception, it's domination through distortion, and it leaves victims in a fog of confusion, guilt, and self-doubt that can take years to escape. Withholding affection. Withholding affection is a cold, calculated form of emotional control that punishes vulnerability by starving it. It is the deliberate denial of love, touch, warmth, and emotional connection as a way to manipulate and dominate. In healthy relationships, affection flows freely, even through conflict. But with this tactic, love becomes conditional, something to be earned, bargained for, or revoked entirely at the slightest misstep. The manipulator doesn't scream or slam doors. They simply go cold. Their arms stop reaching for you. Their words lose tenderness. Their eyes don't see you anymore. You ache for the connection that once came so easily, so naturally. You wonder what changed, and they never say. Instead, they let you sit in confusion, drowning in silence, while they dangle the very affection your soul craves just out of reach. This isn't a lack of emotion. It's the weaponization of it. The manipulator knows exactly what they're doing. They give just enough to keep hope alive, then retreat when you need closeness most. Over time, you internalize the punishment. You start believing that love is something you must earn through silence, submission, or self-betrayal. You stop asking for what you need. You stop speaking your truth, all to avoid that gut-wrenching withdrawal of their touch, their praise, their warmth. Withholding affection is not about distance, it's about control. It strips love of safety and turns intimacy into a battlefield. And the saddest part, you'll keep reaching for them, not because they're loving, but because they taught you that love is something you have to chase, even when it runs from you. Financial control. Financial control is one of the most invisible yet paralyzing forms of manipulation, where money becomes not a shared resource, but a weapon used to dominate, restrict, and isolate. It's not always about who earns more. It's about who controls access, decisions, and freedom. When someone uses finances to manipulate, they aren't just managing money, they're managing you. It often starts subtly. They suggest putting everything in one account for simplicity, but suddenly you can't access your own earnings without permission. They insist on paying for everything, but later throw it in your face as leverage. They give you an allowance, like a child, while they spend freely. Over time, your autonomy is stripped away. You stop buying things you need. You feel guilt for every expense. You start asking before making the smallest financial decision. This control extends far beyond the bank account. It dictates where you go, what you eat, what you wear, whether you can leave. You become trapped, not with ropes or walls, but with financial dependence that chokes every attempt to break free. And when you try to fight back, they'll say you're ungrateful, that they're just looking out for the future. That money isn't love, but they've made it the price of your existence. Financial control isolates victims from escape, from options, from identity. It silently devours their independence until they believe they can't survive without the one who's holding the purse strings. And that's the most brutal part. It doesn't just steal your money, it steals your freedom, your dignity, and your ability to choose your own life. Shaming is a ruthless manipulation tactic that strikes at the very core of who you are. It's not about correcting behavior. It's about making you feel defective, unworthy, or fundamentally wrong for simply being yourself. Unlike guilt, which whispers you did something bad, shame screams you are bad, and manipulators wield it like a scalpel, cutting deep and silent until you bleed self-doubt. It begins in the smallest moments. You open up about a dream and they scoff. That's unrealistic. You wear something bold and they sneer. That's not flattering on you. You cry and they roll their eyes. You're so dramatic. Slowly, you begin to shrink. You start editing yourself before you speak, dressing to avoid comments, repressing emotions to avoid ridicule. You're not changing because you want to. You're changing because you've been shamed into believing you should. Shaming disguises itself as tough love, blunt honesty, or concern, but its purpose is to control, to silence your voice, to mold you into something more acceptable to the manipulator's liking. It leaves you second-guessing your instincts, your talents, your worth. And the worst part is how deeply it embeds itself. Even when they're gone, the echo of their judgment lingers in your mind, repeating their cruelest words in your own voice. Shaming isn't discipline. It's emotional abuse wrapped in superiority. And it doesn't just change how you see the manipulator, it changes how you see yourself. What was once confidence becomes shame's shadow, and eventually you stop needing them to tear you down. You've learned to do it yourself. Isolating from friends and family. Isolating someone from their friends and family is a brutal manipulation tactic that doesn't always begin with a command. It often starts with concern. I just don't think they're good for you. Why do you need them when you have me? It sounds protective, even loving, but beneath the surface, it's a calculated strategy to cut you off from every lifeline that could remind you of who you are without them. It begins slowly. They roll their eyes when you mention a close friend. They pick fights before family events. They sulk after you spend time with anyone who isn't them. Soon, hanging out with others feels like betrayal. You start canceling plans, turning down invitations, avoiding phone calls, not because you want to, but because it's easier than dealing with the emotional punishment that follows. Over time, your world shrinks. You stop sharing updates. Your support system grows quiet, distant. You're surrounded only by the person who's actively shrinking your identity. And once you're isolated, the real control begins. because now there's no one left to validate your pain, no one to challenge their version of events, no one to remind you of your worth outside of them. Isolation is not just about physical distance, it's about psychological ownership. You lose your mirrors, those people who reflect back your strength, your history, your truth, and in that silence, the manipulator becomes your only voice, your only reality, your only connection. It's not love, it's captivity, and by the time you realize it, you're already alone in a room they built around you. Fearmongering. Fearmongering is a vicious manipulation tactic that thrives on anxiety, panic, and worst-case scenarios. It's the deliberate act of planting fear to control decisions, limit independence, and shatter your sense of safety. The manipulator doesn't guide, they terrorize. They paint the world as dangerous, people as untrustworthy, and every choice outside their influence as a looming disaster. And they do it all while positioning themselves as your only safe harbor. At first, it may sound like concern. I just don't want you to get hurt. But soon, every idea you have, every step you take, is met with a shadow of fear. That'll never work. You'll fail. They're going to leave you. You don't know what you're doing. You start doubting your plans, your passions, your path. The world begins to feel hostile, not because it is, but because someone made it feel that way. Fear-mongering is about control, not protection. It traps you in a prison of imagined threats so that you'll cling to the manipulator for guidance, reassurance, and permission. They exploit your insecurities, exaggerate your weaknesses, and constantly remind you of everything that could go wrong if you don't listen to them. It becomes emotional terrorism, waging a psychological war where your dreams die not from failure, but from never even beginning. You stop taking risks, you stop trusting others, you stop believing in yourself, and the manipulator sits comfortably, knowing they've made you afraid of the very freedom that could save you. That's the true cost of fear-mongering, not just fear itself, but the slow, suffocating death of your potential. Future faking. Future faking is the manipulation of hope. It's the art of selling dreams that were never meant to be fulfilled, luring you into compliance with promises so vivid, so beautiful, you willingly silence your instincts just to believe them. The manipulator paints your future together in cinematic detail: marriage, travel, business ventures, babies, success. But it's all a performance. The promises feel real because you feel real in them, and that's what makes it so devastating. They'll talk about buying a home together while refusing to commit. They'll say, when things settle down, I'll make you my priority, while ignoring your needs in the present. They use the word soon like a spell. Soon we'll move in. Soon I'll change. Soon we'll start that life we talked about. You hold on, not to the person, but to the future they promised you. And as you wait, months pass, then years. You begin rearranging your life, making sacrifices, bending your boundaries, all to protect a dream they never intended to deliver. Every confrontation is met with a new excuse, a new delay, or worse, a new fantasy. It's the bait that keeps you running in circles, starving for a version of them that only exists in your imagination. The cruel brilliance of future faking is how it turns your own desires against you. It hijacks your hope, weaponizes your love, and keeps you chasing a tomorrow that's always just out of reach. And when you finally ask where the future went, they'll blame you for being impatient, for pushing too hard, for believing them at all. Moving the goalposts. Moving the goalposts is a maddening manipulation tactic where no matter how hard you try, it's never enough because the target keeps shifting. At first, you're given a clear expectation. Meet this deadline, say these words, act this way. And so you do. You push yourself, bend over backwards, prove your worth. But just as you get close, they change the rules. Suddenly, the praise disappears, the approval vanishes, and the goal that once seemed within reach now feels impossibly distant. This tactic thrives on exhaustion and confusion. You're made to feel like you're constantly failing, even when you're performing beyond what was asked. They say, "That's not what I meant," or "You still don't get it," or "I need more from you." And you try again and again and again, caught in a desperate cycle of proving, pleasing, and chasing validation that never comes. The manipulator's power lies in their inconsistency. The goal was never meant to be achieved. It was designed to control. By keeping the finish line moving, they keep you moving, working harder, apologizing more, giving endlessly without ever feeling secure or good enough. And that's the point. They don't want resolution. They want dominance. They want you dependent on their shifting approval, so you never stop trying to win something that isn't even real. Eventually, your self-worth becomes tethered to their ever-changing expectations. You lose sight of your own standards, your own needs, your own voice, because you're too busy trying to meet a standard that was never meant to be reached. This isn't love. This is psychological enslavement by design. Intimidation is the raw, unfiltered weapon of control that relies not on persuasion or manipulation of words, but on fear. It doesn't always come with raised fists or shouted threats. Sometimes it's a look, a slammed door, a sudden silence thick with tension. It's the sense that danger is one wrong move away, and it keeps you frozen, compliant, and quiet. The person who uses intimidation doesn't need to hurt you to control you. They just need you to believe they could. A clenched jaw during an argument, standing just a little too close, breaking something in anger, driving recklessly during a fight. All of it says, "You are not safe when I'm upset." And once that belief is planted, they own your reactions. You begin filtering every word, every action, through the lens of, will this set them off? What makes intimidation especially vile is how it hides in plain sight. To outsiders, they seem strong, passionate, maybe just intense. But behind closed doors, you're shrinking. You avoid eye contact. You adjust your tone. You say sorry even when you've done nothing wrong. The room may be silent, but your nervous system is screaming. You are in survival mode, constantly. Intimidation steals your voice before you even realize it's gone. It doesn't ask for submission, it demands it. Through fear so quiet, it can be mistaken for love. And when you try to speak up, they'll call you dramatic, overly sensitive, irrational. But deep down, you know the truth. It's not in your head, it's in their eyes, their fists, their silence. It's always there, just waiting. Character assassination. Character assassination is a brutal manipulation tactic that doesn't just target your actions. It aims to destroy your reputation, your credibility, and your identity. It's the calculated, malicious act of planting seeds of doubt about who you are, behind your back, in whispered conversations, in subtle smirks, in twisted stories. And by the time you realize what's happening, people have already begun to look at you differently, with suspicion instead of warmth, distance instead of trust. The manipulator doesn't just attack you outright, they erode you piece by piece. "I'm worried about them," they might say with feigned concern. "They've been acting strange lately." They'll confide in someone, eyes lowered, voice soft. They cloak their venom in faux innocence, casting themselves as the reasonable one while painting you as unstable, untrustworthy, overreactive. It's not slander, it's a smear campaign wearing a halo. This tactic is especially sinister because it isolates you. Suddenly, people pull away. They hesitate before responding. You sense their discomfort, but can't quite explain it. You feel the shift, but can't prove the cause. That's the design. The manipulator doesn't just want to hurt you. They want to erase your version of reality and replace it with theirs. They want others to doubt you before you even speak. And when you try to defend yourself, you look paranoid. "See," the manipulator says, with a sigh, "this is what I was talking about." It's psychological poisoning, slow, silent, and devastating. Character assassination doesn't just bruise the ego. It kills relationships, reputations, and, if you let it, your belief in your own worth. Pathological lying. Pathological lying is a manipulation tactic so corrosive it distorts the very foundation of reality. It's not just about hiding the truth, it's about rewriting it over and over again until facts dissolve and trust is obliterated. The pathological liar doesn't lie out of panic or to avoid consequences. They lie as a reflex, as a tool, as a means of control. Their lies aren't occasional. They are compulsive, crafted, and often completely unnecessary. And that's what makes them so terrifying. One day they say they were at work. The next they mention a dinner you never knew happened. You ask for clarification, and suddenly you're accused of snooping, of being insecure. Their stories twist, timelines blur, and when you try to piece things together, the picture never fits. You doubt them, then you doubt yourself, and eventually you stop asking questions because you're exhausted from trying to catch someone who's always 2 steps ahead. Pathological liars are masters of charm, often intelligent and emotionally attuned. They know exactly what you want to hear, and they serve it with a smile that makes you believe, despite your gut screaming otherwise. Over time, you become desensitized to contradictions, conditioned to accept confusion as normal. You lose trust not only in them, but in yourself. This kind of lying isn't just dishonest. It's a psychological siege. It shatters certainty, leaving you stranded in a fog where nothing feels real. You start to wonder if you're the unstable one, if maybe you're just overthinking. But you're not. You're just being lied to, again and again and again. Darvo: deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. Darvo is one of the most disorienting and emotionally destabilizing manipulation tactics ever weaponized. It stands for deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender, a psychological spin move so swift and savage that it leaves you questioning everything, including your right to feel hurt in the first place. You bring up a violation, an insult, a betrayal, and instead of accountability, you're met with distortion so twisted it turns your pain into a crime. First, they deny. That never happened. You're making things up. You're remembering it wrong. Your truth is dismissed. Your experience is erased. And just as your voice trembles with frustration, they attack. Suddenly, you're too emotional, always causing drama, impossible to talk to. You go from victim to villain in seconds. Then comes the final blow. They reverse the roles. Now they are the ones who feel wronged. They are the ones who say they're hurt by your accusations. You're left blinking, breathless, apologizing for confronting the very thing they did to you. Darvo doesn't just shift the narrative, it flips it so violently that it leaves you gasping in the ruins of your own reality. This tactic isn't a defense, it's a weapon of confusion. It protects abusers by turning truth into chaos, making you the aggressor for daring to name your pain. Over time, Darvo breaks your trust in your memory, your emotions, your voice. You begin to question if maybe you were the problem all along. That's how Darvo wins, not with force, but with psychological inversion that leaves the real harm buried beneath shame and silence. Fake apologies. Fake apologies are emotional daggers wrapped in velvet, soft on the surface, but meant to cut deep. They are not about remorse or healing. They are about manipulation, control, and image management. A fake apology is designed to shut you up, not lift you up. It's not, "I'm sorry I hurt you." It's, "I'm sorry you feel that way," as if your pain is the problem, not their behavior. The manipulator uses apologies not to make amends, but to avoid consequences. They apologize when you cry, when you threaten to leave, or when their reputation is on the line. But listen closely. Their words lack ownership. They'll say, "I didn't mean to upset you," instead of, "I was wrong." They'll say, "Let's just move on," when you haven't even healed. Their goal isn't to make it right, it's to make it go away. Over time, you learn that conflict resolution is a one-way street. You forgive, They reset and nothing changes. Your boundaries blur because they always find a way to sound sincere enough to keep you from leaving. And the cruelty of it is that you want to believe them because hope is easier than heartbreak. But fake apologies are emotional gaslighting in disguise. They dismiss your hurt, delay your healing, and allow the cycle to continue. You're not being comforted. You're being manipulated into silence. And every time you accept an apology that isn't real, you hand back the power they stole from you in the first place. Projection is a deeply manipulative psychological tactic where the abuser unloads their own flaws, guilt, or dark intentions onto you, making you carry what they cannot face in themselves. It's not just denial, it's displacement. Instead of owning their jealousy, they accuse you of being possessive. Instead of admitting their dishonesty, they question your integrity. And slowly, insidiously, you begin to doubt your own character. At first, it seems confusing. They react with outrage to things you never did. They question your loyalty, your kindness, your truth, often with conviction so strong it feels real. You scramble to defend yourself, trying to understand how the person you care about suddenly sees you as selfish, manipulative, or cruel. But it's not about truth. It's about deflection. The parts of themselves they fear, they hurl outward like poison darts onto the one person they know will absorb them without question. This tactic is devastating because it makes you fight battles that aren't yours. You end up defending yourself against shadows, traits you don't even possess, while they walk away untouched, unexamined, and unaccountable. The more you try to prove your innocence, the more entangled you become in their unresolved darkness. And the more confused and exhausted you get, the more control they gain. Projection turns their chaos into your crisis. It's emotional gaslighting layered with blame, designed to keep you off balance, hypervigilant, and perpetually on trial. Over time, you may even start believing the lies that maybe you are the problem. That's the final triumph of projection, when you begin carrying the guilt they were too cowardly to hold themselves. Love withdrawal. Love withdrawal is one of the most punishing manipulation tactics because it weaponizes the very thing you crave the most. Affection. It's not screaming or slamming doors. It's silence where there was once warmth. It's the sudden disappearance of touch, praise, attention, and connection, used not as a consequence of conflict, but as a tool to control and punish. The manipulator knows you're emotionally invested, and they use that vulnerability to bend your behavior to their will. One moment you feel adored, the next you feel invisible. They stop saying I love you. They stop texting back. Their kisses become cold, their hugs mechanical. You're left in a state of panic, trying to decode what you did wrong. You beg for reassurance, for a sign that you're still wanted, still enough, but all you get is emotional famine. Love withdrawal conditions you to perform. You start changing how you speak, how you dress, how you act, just to get the love back. And when they finally return to you with affection, it feels like oxygen. You feel relieved, grateful even, as if you were the one at fault. And so the cycle begins. Warmth, withdrawal, desperation, compliance, again and again. This isn't love. It's psychological starvation. It teaches you that affection must be earned through obedience, not freely given. It creates addiction, not to the person, but to the fleeting validation they give and snatch away. And over time, it erodes your self-worth until you no longer know the difference between love and control. You only know you'll do anything to not feel that emptiness again. Smear campaigns. Smear campaigns are calculated character assaults designed not just to hurt you, but to annihilate your credibility, isolate you from your support system, and rewrite the narrative of who you are. They are not impulsive outbursts. They are premeditated psychological ambushes carried out behind your back while you're still trying to make sense of the silence. And by the time you hear the whispers, the damage is already spreading. The manipulator paints themselves as the victim and you as the villain. They drip feed half-truths, distortions, and outright lies to your friends, family, co-workers, anyone who might once have stood by you. I didn't want to say anything, but you wouldn't believe what they did to me. They cry, they sigh, they pretend they're only seeking support while they poison every connection you thought was solid. What makes smear campaigns so devastating is how isolating they are. People start looking at you differently. They withdraw, they stop reaching out, and you can't understand why until you realize that someone has been tearing your name apart while wearing your trust like a mask. And if you defend yourself too fiercely, you confirm the very lies they spread. See? So reactive, so unstable. I told you. The manipulator doesn't just want to hurt you, they want to control the story of you. They want to make sure that when you cry out, no one listens. That when you tell your truth, no one believes it. Smear campaigns aren't just betrayal, they are social assassination, and they kill slowly, relationship by relationship, word by word, lie by lie. Minimizing abuse. Minimizing abuse is a sinister manipulation tactic that doesn't deny what happened. It just strips it of its weight. The abuser doesn't say, "That didn't happen." They say, "It wasn't that bad. You're overreacting." Everyone argues. In these small, deliberate dismissals, they erase the damage they cause while forcing you to question your right to feel hurt. It's emotional theft, stealing the legitimacy of your pain while keeping their hands clean. After a cruel insult, they shrug and say, "I was just joking." After an explosive outburst, they call it just stress. After controlling your every move, they claim they're just protective. And slowly, your brain starts to blur the lines. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe you are too sensitive. Maybe this is just how relationships are. That's the trap. Minimization is how abusers make the intolerable feel acceptable. They recast physical violence as a slip-up, emotional abuse as tough love, and coercion as passion. And because they occasionally show affection, you cling to the good moments like lifelines, using them to justify staying. You defend them to others. Worse, you start defending them to yourself. The damage of this tactic isn't just in the moment, it's in how it rewires your perception. It breaks your internal compass. You stop trusting your instincts. You downplay your wounds. You convince yourself that surviving is proof it wasn't really that bad. But deep down, your body remembers, your heart remembers, and what they minimize lives on inside you, louder than they ever admitted. Playing dumb. Playing dumb is a covert manipulation tactic where ignorance is feigned to escape accountability, stall confrontation, or twist power dynamics, all while leaving the victim seething with frustration and doubt. It's not innocence, it's a performance. A manipulator will look you in the eye and say, "I don't know what you're talking about," with a blank stare so convincing it makes you feel irrational for even asking. It's weaponized incompetence masked as confusion. You express a boundary and they respond with wide-eyed cluelessness. You bring up a repeated hurt and they shrug. "I didn't know that bothered you," but they did. They always knew. They just didn't care enough to stop until they were caught. And when that moment comes, they don't engage. They retreat behind a wall of faux naivety, forcing you to explain, re-explain, justify, and calm yourself down while they sit in the safety of, "I'm just not good at this." Over time, this tactic breaks you down. You start to question whether you're overreacting. You begin to do everything yourself, not because they can't, but because you've been conditioned to believe they never will. Playing dumb is not harmless. It's a smokescreen that lets the manipulator stay passive while you carry the emotional, mental, and logistical weight of the relationship. And the worst part? If you get angry, you're the one who looks cruel for yelling at someone who's trying their best, but they're not trying. They're hiding behind fake forgetfulness, selective memory, and deliberate inaction, all while watching you burn out from doing everything they pretend not to understand. Threatening self-harm. Threatening self-harm is one of the most emotionally violent manipulation tactics someone can use because it doesn't aim to control you through guilt or charm. It does it through fear, panic, and emotional hostage-taking. The manipulator turns their own pain into your prison. With one chilling sentence, "If you leave me, I'll kill myself," they transfer the weight of their life onto your shoulders, making your freedom feel fatal. It doesn't always start with explicit threats. Sometimes it's whispered pain. "I don't know how I'd go on without you." Sometimes it's photos of pills, cryptic texts in the middle of the night, or dark social media posts meant only for your eyes. You feel paralyzed, not just by worry, but by the crushing belief that their survival now depends on your compliance. If you walk away, are you the reason they die? This tactic works because it preys on your empathy. You care, and they know it. They manipulate your compassion, twisting it into chains. And suddenly, you're not staying because you love them. You're staying because you're terrified of what will happen if you don't. You become their keeper, their lifeline, their emotional paramedic, while your own needs are buried beneath their crises. But what they're doing isn't vulnerability, it's coercion. Real pain doesn't demand loyalty through fear. Threatening self-harm is emotional blackmail at its cruelest, binding you to someone through terror instead of love. It forces you to carry a responsibility that was never yours, and the heaviest part isn't the threat itself. It's the silence it traps you in, the unbearable pressure to save someone by sacrificing yourself. Using secrets against someone is a betrayal so intimate, so calculated, that it leaves a scar far deeper than a lie. It weaponizes trust itself. It begins in moments of vulnerability. You share something private, fragile, something you wouldn't tell just anyone. And at the time, it feels safe. They listen. They nod. They may even comfort you. But beneath the surface, they're storing that truth, not to protect it, but to use it as leverage when the time comes. The manipulator holds your secrets like loaded ammunition. At first, it's subtle, a sharp comment masked as a joke, a sudden shift in tone that hits too close to home. But when you challenge them, they escalate. "Don't forget what you told me," they say. Or worse, they tell someone else. Your pain, your shame, your past, it becomes currency in their game of control. This tactic is deeply cruel because it corrupts the very foundation of intimacy. You begin to fear openness. You start censoring yourself, walking through your life armored, disconnected, and anxious. If you've confided in someone who uses your truth to shame, silence, or manipulate you, they haven't just crossed a line, they've shattered something sacred. Over time, this kind of betrayal can leave you emotionally paralyzed. You question who you can trust, if anyone at all. The very thing you once believed brought you closer, vulnerability, becomes something you fear. And that is exactly what the manipulator wants, for you to stay small, scared, and silent while they hold your secrets like chains around your soul. Rewriting history. Rewriting history is a chilling manipulation tactic where the abuser doesn't just deny what happened. They reconstruct it, bending the past to suit their narrative and make you question your own memory, your own sanity, your own truth. It's not just lying, it's a systematic reshaping of shared experiences that turns reality into a weapon. One day, you're sure of what you lived through. The next, they insist it never happened that way, or worse, that you were the problem all along. They tell you the screaming fight was just a normal disagreement. They swear you were fine with it at the time, even though you remember crying. They retell stories in front of others, smiling as they recast themselves as the calm, caring one, and you as dramatic, unstable, or cruel. You hear it so many times, you start to doubt yourself. Maybe I did overreact. Maybe I'm misremembering. This is psychological erosion. Your version of events, the one that hurt, the one that scarred you, gets dismantled piece by piece until you no longer trust your own mind. They win not by proving their innocence, but by destroying your confidence in what you know to be true. Rewriting history isolates you. You stop sharing your story because you're afraid no one will believe it. You become quiet in your pain, unsure whether your trauma was real or imagined. And while you struggle in silence, the manipulator thrives, untouched, unchallenged, untethered from accountability. They don't just erase the past, they steal it from you, and in doing so, they rewrite who you are. Faux concern. Faux concern is a manipulation tactic drenched in sweetness on the surface, but laced with poison underneath. It's when someone pretends to care about you, not to comfort or help, but to control, shame, or subtly tear you down under the mask of kindness. Their words sound supportive, their tone soft, but the message underneath is clear. You're broken, you're a problem, and you need them to fix you. It starts with phrases like, "I'm just worried about you," or "You've seemed off lately." At first, it feels like compassion, but then comes the subtle jab. "Maybe you should stop taking things so personally," or "I just think it's strange how emotional you've been." The manipulator disguises judgment as help, superiority as support, and because it's wrapped in empathy, you question your own instincts. Are they really concerned, or are they quietly cutting me down? This tactic is particularly dangerous because it erodes your trust in genuine support. You begin to associate care with control, softness with shame. You become guarded, hesitant to reach out, unsure if vulnerability will be met with love or used against you later. Faux concern often shows up in toxic relationships, workplaces, and families where control is maintained not through force, but through the slow, calculated suggestion that you are the issue. It's not compassion when someone uses your pain to make themselves feel powerful. It's not love when concern comes with strings, judgment, or condescension. It's manipulation dressed in sympathy, a knife hidden in a hug, and its damage runs deep because it doesn't just hurt you, it teaches you to fear the very thing you need most, genuine connection. Infantilizing is a deeply degrading manipulation tactic that cloaks itself in concern but operates as domination. It is the act of treating someone as if they are incapable, naive, or helpless, regardless of their actual age or competence. The manipulator frames their control as protection, their dominance as guidance, but underneath the sugary tone and condescending smiles lies the message: you are not smart enough, strong enough, or stable enough to function without me. They may talk over you in conversations, make decisions on your behalf, or laugh when you express independent thoughts. Aw, that's cute. They micromanage your life, from what you wear to how you spend your money, all under the guise of helping or keeping you safe. But what they're really doing is shrinking you, emotionally, mentally, and socially, until you feel dependent on their validation and approval to exist. Over time, you begin to internalize it. You hesitate before speaking up. You second-guess your choices. You become anxious when you're alone, because somewhere along the way, they convinced you that you can't do life without them. This false sense of inadequacy becomes your new reality, a self-fulfilling prophecy planted by someone who needed you small in order to feel big. Infantilizing isn't care, it's control disguised as kindness. It strips you of autonomy while dressing itself in love, and the longer it continues, the more you forget that you were ever capable in the first place. Because when someone talks to you like a child long enough, you start to believe them, even when the child they see is a lie. Overstepping boundaries. Overstepping boundaries is a manipulation tactic that violates your sense of autonomy under the guise of love, concern, or entitlement. It's not just a physical act, it's psychological trespassing. It's someone pushing into your emotional space, your decisions, your privacy, and then acting like you're the one being unreasonable for trying to protect it. This is not about closeness, it's about control. It often starts small. They read your messages without asking. They show up uninvited. They pressure you to share what you're not ready to reveal. When you push back, they guilt you. Why are you being so closed off? Or, I thought we didn't keep secrets. Your boundaries, your lines of safety, are treated not as walls to be respected, but as obstacles to conquer. And the more you try to hold the line, the more they push, twist, or dismiss it. The danger lies in how subtle and persistent it is. It doesn't always feel like an attack. It can feel like attention, intensity, even affection. But underneath it all is the message: your no doesn't matter to me. Over time, you stop defending your space. You stop asserting your needs. You begin to doubt whether your boundaries were fair in the first place. And once that wall is broken, it rarely gets rebuilt. The manipulator now knows you can be worn down. They've gained access not just to your space, but to your silence. And that silence is where they thrive, stepping deeper into your world, rewriting your rules, and leaving you feeling powerless in the very life you once felt safe in. Covert sabotage. Covert sabotage is the quiet, calculating form of manipulation that poisons your progress while pretending to cheer you on. It's not loud, it's not obvious, it's the subtle unraveling of your efforts, done behind your back, beneath your radar, and often under the mask of love, friendship, or support. The saboteur smiles while holding the scissors, waiting for the perfect moment to snip the thread of your momentum. They forget to deliver your message. They accidentally delete your work. They offer advice that sounds helpful, but steers you straight into failure. They subtly plant seeds of doubt. Are you sure you're ready for that promotion? You always get overwhelmed with these things. They undermine your confidence in the name of realism, whispering limitations while claiming to protect you. It's not the sabotage itself that hurts the most. It's who it comes from. A partner who downplays your dreams, a friend who shares your secrets at just the wrong time, a coworker who smiles in meetings but quietly undercuts your credibility. These people know exactly where to aim because they've seen your blueprints. They know what matters to you, and that's why the damage is so devastating. Over time, you start to question your own abilities. You begin hesitating, procrastinating, doubting your every decision, not realizing the failures aren't all yours. They were orchestrated, engineered, sabotaged, so covert you can't even prove it happened. And when you finally confront it, they'll act confused or wounded. I was only trying to help. But you'll know the truth. They didn't trip you. They just made sure no one caught you when you fell. Using children as pawns. Using children as pawns is one of the most heart-wrenching, destructive forms of manipulation and one of the most unforgivable. It's the deliberate act of placing innocent children in the middle of adult conflict, weaponizing their emotions, loyalty, and love to punish or control the other parent. In these moments, children cease to be seen as human beings with their own needs. They become tools, bargaining chips, and emotional leverage in a game of power and revenge. It's subtle at first. The manipulator makes comments meant to influence. Your mom doesn't really care about you, or if your dad loved you, he'd be here. They drop seeds of doubt, confusion, and guilt into the child's mind until that child starts to question the love and stability of the very people they depend on. The manipulator may withhold contact, distort facts, or flood the child with one-sided narratives, all while wearing a mask of righteousness. The damage isn't temporary, it's lifelong. Children caught in these emotional wars grow up carrying invisible wounds. They learn to distrust connection. They feel torn between two halves of themselves. And the targeted parent? They are forced to watch their child be turned against them, powerless to stop it, punished for trying to protect the bond they once shared. This tactic doesn't just fracture relationships, it crushes childhood itself. It teaches love as a condition, loyalty as currency, and truth as something flexible depending on who's speaking. And the manipulator walks away feeling justified, never seeing, or perhaps not caring, that the person most hurt in their pursuit of control wasn't their enemy. It was their child. Rage baiting, Rage baiting is a brutal manipulation tactic designed to provoke, enrage, and then punish you for reacting. It's emotional entrapment with a sinister twist. They push your buttons, twist your wounds, poke your insecurities. Then, when you finally explode, they step back and paint you as the abuser. It's a performance, a setup, and your anger becomes the show they wanted all along. They say something cruel, knowing it will cut deep. They bring up your past mistakes with a smirk, mock something you love, or jab at your deepest insecurities. At first, you try to stay calm. You explain. You defend. But they keep going, calm and composed, while the storm inside you brews louder. Until finally, you snap. You shout. You break down. And in that moment, they look at you with wide, innocent eyes. Wow, this is what I deal with? Rage baiting isn't about communication. It's about control. They want to push you to the edge so they can discredit everything you say and disarm your credibility. If you're emotional, they don't have to acknowledge your pain. If you're angry, they don't have to address their cruelty. They win the argument by provoking your reaction, not by being right. What makes this tactic so cruel is that it feeds on your vulnerability. Your pain becomes their weapon, and then they weaponize your reaction to justify more distance, more control, or worse, turning others against you. They don't want resolution, they want detonation, and when you finally break, they'll be standing there, calm and victorious, while you burn. Public humiliation. Public humiliation is the cruel act of turning shame into a spectacle, where your pain becomes their performance. The manipulator doesn't just want to wound you, they want an audience for it. In front of friends, co-workers, family, or even strangers, they mock you, belittle you, expose your vulnerabilities, or twist private struggles into public jokes. And while others laugh or awkwardly shift in silence, your dignity is stripped away in real time. It's not always direct. Sometimes it's a funny story told at your expense. Sometimes it's a sarcastic jab about your weight, intelligence, past, or personality, served with a smile that dares you to challenge them. If you confront it, you're told you're too sensitive. I was just joking. Lighten up. But what you feel in that moment isn't humor. It's the burning sting of betrayal and exposure. Public humiliation doesn't just hurt. It isolates. It makes others view you differently. It plants seeds of doubt about your competence, your worth, your sanity. And because it happens so publicly, you often feel too shocked or ashamed to defend yourself. You stand there, naked, wordless, while the manipulator savors the power of watching you shrink. This tactic is designed to break your spirit and boost theirs. It's a dominance display, an emotional execution meant to silence, control, and degrade. And long after the laughter fades, the memory stays raw, humiliating, and carved into your sense of self. Because being humiliated isn't something you forget. It's something you carry, silently, while they pretend it was all in good fun. Ambiguous compliments, negging. Ambiguous compliments, better known as negging, are insults dressed as praise, crafted to destabilize your confidence while appearing charming or flirtatious. It's not a slip of the tongue, it's a strategy. A manipulator uses negging to make you feel slightly inferior, just uncertain enough about your worth that you seek their approval to regain your balance. And once you're chasing validation, they have you exactly where they want you. It sounds like this: "You'd be really pretty if you smiled more," or "Wow, I usually don't go for girls like you, but there's something about you." You laugh it off, unsure if you've been flattered or insulted, but inside, something stings. That's the point. It's a mental hook designed to lodge itself into your self-esteem, making you question your value just enough to crave their reassurance. Negging is especially common in dating dynamics, where the manipulator wants to keep you off-center. Instead of building you up, they erode you subtly, one backhanded comment at a time. It's not about being funny or bold, it's about power. If they can make you feel less than, even slightly, they create a gap. and position themselves as the one who can fill it, the savior, the prize, the one whose opinion now matters more than your own. Over time, these compliments compound. You feel flattered when they finally offer genuine praise, not realizing you've been trained to earn it. And the worst part, you may start believing them, that you're lucky to have their attention, that you're not enough without it. But negging isn't flirtation, it's emotional erosion with a smile. Sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation is a covert yet devastating manipulation tactic that targets the most basic human need, rest. It's not just about staying awake, it's about breaking down your ability to think clearly, feel stable, and defend yourself. The manipulator uses exhaustion as a weapon, slowly unraveling your mental resilience until your defenses collapse and your compliance becomes automatic. It doesn't always look like torture. Sometimes it's disguised as endless late-night conversations that spiral into arguments. Sometimes it's phone calls at 2 a.m. to talk about us. Sometimes it's intentionally keeping you up during moments of conflict, pacing the room, picking fights, slamming doors, knowing full well that you're too drained to fight back. The goal isn't connection, it's control. Over time, the effects are catastrophic. You start forgetting things. You cry more, you doubt your own thoughts, misplace your words, lose your grip on what's real. You become emotionally raw, mentally foggy, and physically fragile. And in that vulnerable state, the manipulator gains more power, not because they're stronger, but because you're too tired to resist. You say yes to things you would have refused. You surrender, not out of agreement, but out of survival. Sleep deprivation strips you of your clarity and strength, two things you desperately need when facing emotional abuse. And when you finally break, when you scream, cry, beg, they call you unstable. They say you're overreacting. They make your exhaustion the evidence of your failure, never admitting they orchestrated it from the very first sleepless night, because a tired mind is easier to mold and a worn-down soul is easier to own. Just joking abuse. Just joking abuse is the coward's cloak, a cruel manipulation tactic where verbal assaults, personal attacks, and demeaning comments are disguised as humor to avoid accountability. The abuser doesn't stab outright. They smile as they do it. They insult your appearance, mock your dreams, criticize your intelligence, and then laugh it off with a casual, "Relax, I was just joking." It's a trap. React. And you're too sensitive. Stay silent, and you silently agree. This tactic is uniquely damaging because it poisons trust in the smallest of moments. At dinner with friends, they take a jab at your cooking. At a party, they joke about your anxiety. In front of family, they say something humiliating that makes your cheeks burn. You laugh along, even though it hurts, because if you don't, you'll be painted as uptight, emotional, or worse, humorless. Your pain becomes the punchline, and your boundaries become the joke. Just joking abuse is never really about comedy. It's about control. It allows the abuser to test your limits, express contempt, and gauge how much disrespect you'll tolerate, all without taking responsibility. They get to land the blow and escape the consequences, all while you're left questioning whether your hurt is even valid. Over time, these jokes chip away at your self-esteem. They create a relationship where cruelty is normalized and your discomfort is dismissed. You stop speaking up, you start laughing with them, and one day you realize you've been the target of every joke, and they've never been funny. They've only ever been cruel, wrapped in a smile sharp enough to cut. Hoovering is a deeply manipulative tactic named after the vacuum cleaner, and for good reason. It's the desperate, strategic attempt to suck you back in after you've broken free from a toxic dynamic. The manipulator senses your distance, your silence, your strength, your healing, and suddenly they become everything you ever wanted them to be. Sweet messages flood in. "I miss you. I've changed. I can't live without you." It feels like redemption, but it's not. It's bait. Hoovering doesn't come from remorse, it comes from losing control. The manipulator isn't grieving your absence, they're panicking over their slipping power, so they pour on the charm, offer apologies that sound convincing, cry, beg, promise therapy, even show fleeting vulnerability, all to hook your heart and pull you back under their influence. You might hear songs that remind them of you. They might show up uninvited, send gifts, or create fake emergencies to reinsert themselves into your life. And the cruelest twist? They know exactly what you longed to hear before. They use your history, your soft spots, your hopes, and your healing against you, like weapons disguised as love. The moment you let them back in, though, the mask drops. The cycle restarts. The charm fades. The same wounds reopen. Because hoovering was never about building something new. It was about keeping you from leaving, keeping you stuck in a loop where they win every time you return. Hoovering isn't affection. It's panic dressed as love, a last-ditch illusion to reel you back before you remember what it feels like to breathe without them. Excessive gift-giving with strings. Excessive gift-giving with strings is a manipulation tactic that disguises control as generosity. On the surface, it looks like kindness, lavish gifts, surprise deliveries, extravagant gestures. You feel flattered, even special. But underneath the glitter and wrapping paper lies an unspoken contract. You owe me now. This isn't about giving. It's about owning you through guilt, obligation, and emotional debt. The manipulator showers you with things you didn't ask for, things they know will impress or overwhelm you. A new phone, a paid vacation, an expensive piece of jewelry, and at first you feel grateful, maybe even lucky. But soon, the pressure begins. They start reminding you of what they did. They reference the money spent, the effort made. After everything I've done for you becomes their refrain. You begin to realize that every gift had a hook. You feel guilty for saying no. You feel selfish for setting boundaries. You start agreeing to things you're uncomfortable with, conversations, commitments, even intimacy, because turning them down feels like betrayal. After all, they were so generous. How can you reject someone who's given you so much? This tactic is especially dangerous because it looks like love. To outsiders, the manipulator seems giving, thoughtful, romantic. But you know the truth, their gifts come with expectations, and those expectations suffocate your autonomy. You're no longer free to act from desire. You're acting from obligation. You didn't receive a gift. You were bought. And with every string they attach, you lose a piece of yourself, tied tightly in a bow you never asked for. Fake emergencies. Fake emergencies are a manipulation tactic rooted in chaos and urgency, designed not to solve real problems, but to hijack your attention, control your emotions, and force your focus back onto the manipulator. It's emotional bait with a ticking clock, meant to summon your care, your panic, your availability immediately. The crisis may be fabricated, exaggerated, or strategically timed, but its purpose is always the same: to keep you tethered. They text you frantically right before your job interview. They collapse into drama when you try to set a boundary. They get sick the moment you step away, call you crying while you're out with friends, claim something terrible just happened. Again, right after you try to create distance. The timing is never random. The urgency is never innocent. It's a siren scream designed to drown out your needs with theirs. These emergencies force you into emotional triage. You drop everything, abandon your plans, delay your goals, because what kind of person walks away from someone in crisis? That's exactly the bind they want to trap you in. If you don't respond, you're cold. If you do, they win. Again, over time, you begin living in reactive mode, constantly bracing for the next crisis. It's not compassion they're after, it's command. They don't need help. They need to be the center of your world, and they'll pull every alarm bell they can to make sure you never forget it. And while you're rushing in to save them, they're quietly making sure you never feel safe stepping away. Gaslighting about time. You never told me that. Gaslighting about time is a cunning, reality warping manipulation tactic designed to make you question your memory, your communication, and eventually your sanity. It often takes the form of seemingly innocent denial. You never told me that. I don't remember that conversation. Or, you're confused. That didn't happen. But it's not forgetfulness. It's control. And the weapon is time itself. You clearly remember discussing the plan, the date, the boundary. You even remember the exact words. But when you bring it up again, the manipulator stares blankly, shakes their head, or worse, acts hurt. Why are you making things up, they say, calm and confident. And suddenly, you're not just defending your words, you're defending your mind. Did you misremember? Were you unclear? You second-guess yourself, retracing conversations, scanning texts, wondering if you somehow imagined it. That's the goal, confusion. Because if they can convince you that your memory is faulty, they can rewrite reality in their favor. They miss a commitment? You never said it was that day. They cross a line? You never told me it bothered you. They shift the blame, avoid accountability, and keep you spinning in self-doubt, all while wearing the mask of reason. The longer this goes on, the more disoriented you become. You start documenting things just to feel sane. You hesitate to bring up past conversations. You feel small, foggy, and afraid of getting it wrong. But it's not you. It's a deliberate dismantling of your trust in yourself. Gaslighting about time isn't a lapse in memory. It's a psychological ambush, and it rewires your reality one denial at a time. Using religion to shame and control. Using religion to shame and control is one of the most soul-crushing manipulation tactics because it weaponizes faith, something sacred, personal, and deeply human, to dominate, silence, and subdue. The manipulator cloaks themselves in righteousness, speaking with the authority of God, scripture, or spiritual tradition, while using that power to make you feel unworthy, sinful, broken, or damned unless you submit to them. They don't just criticize your choices, they condemn them. God wouldn't approve of that. A good wife obeys. You're falling out of alignment with His will. What should be a source of comfort and healing becomes a tool of fear and punishment. They cherry-pick verses, twist doctrine, and distort spiritual teachings, not to uplift you, but to control how you think, act, and feel. You stop wearing what you like. You stop speaking your truth. You question your worth, your salvation, your very identity, because they've linked your obedience to your holiness. Disagreeing with them doesn't just feel rebellious, it feels blasphemous. And the pain cuts even deeper when this manipulation comes from someone trusted, a parent, partner, pastor, or spiritual leader, someone who was supposed to guide, not govern. Over time, your spirituality becomes entangled with shame. Your connection to the divine feels polluted by fear, and even when you try to walk away, their voice echoes in your soul, convincing you that freedom equals damnation. But their control isn't sacred, it's sacrilege, because true faith never demands submission through fear. Only a manipulator does that, dressed in devotion, hiding a whip behind the word holy. Exploiting insecurities. Exploiting insecurities is a deeply cruel manipulation tactic that takes the most fragile, hidden parts of who you are and turns them into weapons aimed back at you. It begins with trust, with you revealing a fear, a shame, a soft spot. And at first, they seem safe. They listen, they nod, they say the right things. But later, when it suits them, they take that vulnerable truth and twist it into a dagger. You confide in them about your body image, and they bring it up during an argument. No wonder you hate how you look. You share your fear of being abandoned, and they use it to control your actions. Keep pushing me, and I'll leave. You open up about past trauma, and suddenly they're comparing you to your abuser, mocking your pain, or using it to excuse their behavior. It's not a mistake. It's strategic cruelty. The most chilling part is how personal it feels, because it is personal. They don't pick random insults. They go straight for what you've already questioned about yourself. They reinforce every doubt you've ever whispered alone in the dark. And each time they do it, a part of you shrinks. A part of you folds inward. You start to believe that maybe they're right. Maybe you really are too much, too broken, too insecure to be loved fully. But you're not. You're being manipulated by someone who sees your scars and doesn't protect them. They press into them, smiling, knowing it's the easiest way to keep you small, quiet, and under control. Invalidating emotions. Invalidating emotions is a cruel manipulation tactic that tells you, explicitly or subtly, that your feelings are wrong, too much, or don't matter. It's not about disagreement, it's about dismissal. When someone invalidates your emotions, they're not just disagreeing with how you feel, they're erasing your right to feel it at all. And over time, that erasure starts to eat away at your confidence, your voice, and your very sense of self. It sounds like you're overreacting, you're too sensitive, that didn't happen like that, or the cold, cutting, just get over it. Your pain is met with eye rolls, your fears are brushed aside, your tears become inconveniences, and every time you try to express yourself, you're met with resistance, sarcasm, or silence. The message is clear. Your emotions are not welcome here. This tactic is especially damaging because it teaches you to suppress instead of speak. You start minimizing your own experiences. You doubt your instincts, your hurt, your gut. You become afraid to feel because feeling leads to rejection, and rejection feels like failure. Invalidation isn't always loud or aggressive. Sometimes it's quiet, an awkward pause, a dismissive glance, a subject change, but the impact is the same. You learn to stuff your feelings deep down, and you start smiling through the ache. That's how the manipulator keeps control, by training you to silence yourself before they even have to. When your emotions are constantly invalidated, you don't just lose trust in others, you lose trust in yourself. And once that happens, you no longer need the manipulator to tell you your feelings don't matter. You've learned to do it for them. Social exclusion. Social exclusion is a cold, calculated manipulation tactic that cuts deep, not with words, but with absence. It's the deliberate act of leaving someone out, ignoring them in group settings, or isolating them within their own community, all to instill a sense of rejection, insecurity, and silent desperation. It's psychological exile, and it hurts because it attacks one of the most primal human needs, the need to belong. The manipulator doesn't need to insult you, they just forget to invite you. They whisper when you enter the room. They exclude you from group chats, skip over your name, and act like your presence is optional, barely noticed. You watch from the outside as everyone laughs, connects, bonds without you, and while they'll say, "It wasn't intentional," the pattern speaks louder than the excuse. This tactic is often used to punish you for independence, for speaking up, for setting boundaries. It's designed to make you doubt yourself, to make you come crawling back in compliance just to regain connection. You start questioning what you did wrong, analyzing every interaction, shrinking yourself to fit in again. You're not just left out, you're made to believe it's your fault. The cruelty of social exclusion is its invisibility. To others, nothing seems wrong. The manipulator gets to keep their mask clean while you bleed in silence. You feel erased, not just from the room, but from the relationships you thought were real. And that hollow ache, the sense that you're no longer seen, no longer wanted, isn't just emotional. It's psychological warfare, dressed in silence, powered by presence that's been stolen. Playing dumb to avoid accountability. Playing dumb is a covert manipulation tactic where the abuser pretends not to understand, remember, or know what they clearly do, just to avoid taking responsibility. It's not ignorance, it's strategy. When confronted, they suddenly become confused, helpless, or innocent, making you feel unreasonable for expecting clarity, honesty, or change. It's a game of mental dodgeball, where every truth you throw is met with a blank stare or a shrug that says, "What are you talking about?" They forget the promises they made. They don't recall the hurtful thing they said. They didn't know it would affect you. When called out, they insist, "I didn't mean it that way," or "I didn't realize it was that serious." Over time, this relentless denial of knowledge or awareness makes you feel like you're arguing with a wall, and worse, it starts to make you feel crazy for trying. This tactic flips the script. Now you are the difficult one for demanding answers. You're the aggressor for expecting accountability. And every time they feign confusion or forgetfulness, they delay resolution, dodge growth, and erode your trust just a little bit more. It's not about not knowing, it's about refusing to acknowledge, because acknowledgement would require action, and action would require change. So instead, they play dumb, smiling, stammering, pretending not to understand the pain they cause while you sit there, repeating yourself, losing faith that you'll ever be heard. It's not miscommunication, it's manipulation in its most exhausting, dismissive form. Emotional flooding. Emotional flooding is a manipulation tactic where the manipulator overwhelms you with an intense, chaotic surge of emotions, rage, crying, shouting, accusations, all at once, leaving you mentally paralyzed and emotionally drowned. It's not about expressing pain, it's about drowning you in theirs, so you'll shut down, back off, and surrender your voice just to make it stop. It happens fast. You bring up a concern calmly, and suddenly they explode. They scream, they sob, they throw out 10 accusations for every one thing you tried to say. The conversation shifts from your pain to theirs, and you're left standing in the wreckage of a moment you thought might bring understanding. Their emotional storm isn't a breakdown, it's a bulldozer designed to flatten your truth under the weight of their reaction. The goal is domination through overwhelm. They make the conversation so volatile, so emotionally exhausting, that you eventually stop trying to talk at all. You freeze, you fawn, you apologize just to restore peace, even when you've done nothing wrong. It's emotional terrorism, using intensity, unpredictability, and sheer volume to gain control. Over time, this tactic trains you to avoid conflict entirely. You keep everything inside. You tiptoe. You edit your thoughts before speaking, because you know what happens when you challenge them. You felt the flood, and you never want to drown like that again. Emotional flooding isn't passion, it's power play chaos. And the silence it creates in you, that's not peace. It's learned helplessness, taught by someone who floods the room with noise to keep your truth from ever being heard. Giving ultimatums. Giving ultimatums is a manipulation tactic disguised as decision-making. It offers you a choice, but the truth is, it's a corner, a trap, a forced compliance where one path leads to submission and the other leads to punishment. It's not compromise, it's coercion framed as clarity, a power play that dares you to walk away, knowing you're too scared, too invested, or too emotionally worn down to call their bluff. The manipulator says, "If you don't do this, I'm gone. Choose me or them. Either change or I will." Their voice is calm, even cold, but the impact is violent. It shakes the ground beneath your identity. Suddenly, you're not making a decision. You're trying to avoid abandonment. You're not free to choose. You're cornered into preserving what's left of a relationship they've already rigged. Ultimatums bypass real conversation. They kill vulnerability, ending any hope of mutual understanding. And what's worse, they're often delivered after the manipulator has pushed you to your edge, when you're exhausted, vulnerable, and desperately trying to keep the peace. They time it perfectly, not to find resolution, but to watch you surrender. You begin to reshape yourself around the threat. You change your voice, your friends, your truth, just to avoid that cold or else hanging over your head. It doesn't feel like love anymore. It feels like a test you're always failing, because in the world of ultimatums, there is no intimacy, only control, and the illusion of choice is just that, an illusion, one where freedom comes at the cost of losing the very person who made you feel trapped to begin with. Fake empathy. Fake empathy is the most seductive kind of emotional manipulation because it wears the perfect disguise. It looks like compassion. It sounds like understanding. But underneath the soft voice, the concerned eyes, and the gentle words lies a calculated intent to pacify you, disarm you, and ultimately control you. It's not about feeling with you, it's about getting you to stop feeling at them. The manipulator mirrors your pain with just enough sympathy to make you think they care. "I totally get it," they'll whisper, while their actions tell a different story. They nod while you cry, they say all the right things, but nothing ever changes. You pour your heart out, and they seem to listen, but only long enough to keep you attached, calm, and compliant, because fake empathy isn't about connection. It's a strategy to reset the board without taking any real accountability. This tactic is especially cruel because it exploits your need to be understood. When someone seems to validate your pain, you let your guard down, you trust, you hope, and when that empathy turns out to be empty, the crash is devastating. You feel betrayed, not just emotionally, but spiritually, like someone reached into your soul and mimed caring just to keep you quiet. Over time, you stop knowing what's real. You question whether they ever truly cared, and that confusion becomes another tool they use to keep you in place, because as long as you think they might understand you, you'll keep trying, keep explaining, keep forgiving, while they continue offering empathy as a mask, never as a mirror. Black and white thinking. Black and white thinking is a manipulative mindset that flattens reality into absolutes. You're either good or bad, loyal or a traitor, perfect or worthless. It's not just a rigid worldview. It's a weapon used by manipulators to control, judge, and emotionally corner you. There's no space for nuance, no room for mistakes, no grace for being human. One misstep and you're condemned. At first, it might look like intense admiration. "You're the only one who understands me," they say. "You're everything I've ever wanted." But the moment you set a boundary, express a differing opinion, or disappoint them in even the smallest way, the switch flips. Now you're selfish, cold, toxic. Suddenly, you're the enemy. This tactic is deeply destabilizing. You find yourself desperate to stay on their good side. You over-explain, apologize too often, avoid conflict entirely, not because you've done something wrong, but because you're terrified of being exiled into their category of bad. You start to define yourself by their mood, their approval, their extremes. Black and white thinking thrives on control. It paints complex situations with simplistic judgments to keep you in a reactive state. You're either the savior or the villain, and the roles change at their convenience. You never know where you stand because the standards are always shifting, impossibly high when they want to punish, and momentarily low when they want to reel you back in. Over time, you begin to internalize their worldview. You start labeling yourself in extremes: unlovable, broken, a burden. But the truth is, you're just trapped in someone else's distorted reality, one where compassion is conditional and love is a light switch they flip on and off at will. Weaponizing therapy. Language. Weaponizing therapy. Language is a modern, insidious manipulation tactic that hides abuse behind psychological jargon. It's when someone uses the vocabulary of healing, boundaries, trauma, gaslighting, narcissism, not to grow or connect, but to dominate, shame, and deflect responsibility. It gives them the perfect shield. They sound informed, self-aware, even woke, but beneath the buzzwords is a chilling truth. They're not trying to heal, they're trying to control the narrative. You confront them about something that hurt you, and suddenly you're projecting. You express emotion, and they accuse you of being triggered. They avoid accountability by claiming they're protecting their peace, while ignoring the damage they've done. They label you toxic for setting a boundary, and when you try to defend yourself, They calmly accuse you of gaslighting them. It's a mind twist. Clinical terms used like daggers, cutting into your confidence one label at a time. This tactic is especially cruel because it steals the language of healing from those who truly need it. Victims are left doubting themselves, afraid to speak up for fear of being branded unstable, unhealed, or worse, abusive. The manipulator repositions themselves as emotionally evolved, painting themselves as the therapist and you as the problem needing diagnosis. And the more you try to fight it, the more they intellectualize your pain. Your heartache becomes pathology. Your hurt becomes emotional immaturity. And while they float above it all, cool, clinical, detached, you're left silenced, shamed, and stripped of the very tools you once used to find your voice. It's not healing, it's psychological warfare, dressed in self-help language. Infantilizing adult partners. Infantilizing adult partners is a covert manipulation tactic that disguises condescension as care. It's the relentless treatment of a capable, grown individual as if they're incompetent, naive, or emotionally immature, not to help them, but to dominate them. It masquerades as love, protection, or just trying to help, but beneath the surface lies a disturbing need to control and belittle. The manipulator might take over responsibilities you never asked them to. They correct you constantly, speak for you in conversations, double-check your every move. They might laugh when you express your opinions, pat your head like a child, or say things like, "You'd fall apart without me," or "You don't know what you're doing, but that's okay, sweetie." It sounds sweet. It feels suffocating. You're not being cherished. You're being diminished. This dynamic chips away at your sense of self. You start questioning your decisions, avoiding independence, hesitating before speaking, because you've been made to feel like you're never quite ready to handle life on your own. Over time, you begin to rely on the manipulator more and more, not because you need them, but because they've trained you to believe you do. What makes this tactic especially cruel is its appearance of love. Outsiders may see a doting partner, but you feel the slow erosion of your confidence, your identity, your voice. You're not being supported. You're being controlled through condescension. And each time you're spoken to like a child, a piece of you is told to sit down, stay small, and stay silent. Public gaslighting. Public gaslighting is a vicious manipulation tactic where someone twists your reality in front of others, not only to discredit you, but to humiliate and isolate you while preserving their own image. It's psychological warfare done in the spotlight, where they deny things they've said, contradict your memories, or mock your emotions with a charming smile as the audience watches, confused and unsure who to believe. It doesn't just distort truth, it weaponizes perception. You speak up, calm, shaky, brave, and they chuckle and say, "That's not how it happened." Or worse, "You're being dramatic again. She always does this. We've all seen how emotional he gets." Laughter erupts, eyebrows raise, and your truth withers under the weight of their confidence and casual dismissal. The crowd doesn't see the history. They see performance, and the manipulator is winning. What makes public gaslighting so damaging is that it erodes not only your grip on reality, but your credibility. It forces you to question your own memories in front of people you need to believe in you, friends, family, co-workers, and when no one stands up, that silence is deafening. You start to wonder if you imagined it all. Public gaslighting is meant to shame you into silence, to turn your truth into a spectacle, to manipulate the narrative until you appear unstable, overreactive, or irrational, while they play calm, cool, and composed. It's a masterclass in image control, using the crowd as both shield and weapon. And the deepest wound, it's not just being lied to, it's watching people believe the lie while you stand there, unraveling, unheard in plain sight. Recording without consent. Recording without consent is a manipulative tactic that turns privacy into vulnerability and trust into surveillance. It's not about safety, it's about power. When someone secretly records you during conversations, arguments, or personal moments, they're not preserving truth, they're collecting ammunition. It's a betrayal disguised as preparation, a silent way of saying, I don't trust you, but you better fear me. It often starts with suspicion. They don't tell you they're recording. You only find out later when they quote you word for word, or worse, play it back to shame, corner, or threaten you. You feel sick, exposed, violated. Your words, once private, are no longer yours. And now, anything you say, no matter how vulnerable, emotional, or raw, can be used against you. They justify it by saying they needed proof or protection, but what they're really doing is shifting the power dynamic. You become hyper-aware, afraid to speak freely, you censor yourself, you walk on eggshells, and they know it. That's the goal, to make you doubt what's safe to share, and in turn, isolate you from your own voice. Recording without consent is digital gaslighting. It erases the unspoken agreements of intimacy, replacing trust with surveillance. It's not about clarity, it's about control, about having the upper hand, whether to manipulate a narrative, win an argument, or humiliate you into silence. The betrayal doesn't just live in the file, it lives in the fear it leaves behind, the constant sense that your most private moments might be playing somewhere else, in someone else's hands, with your consent ripped away like it never mattered. Fake helplessness. Fake helplessness is a manipulation tactic cloaked in vulnerability, one that pretends to be weak, incapable, or lost in order to shift responsibility, avoid accountability, and control others through guilt and exhaustion. The manipulator doesn't raise their voice or demand anything outright. Instead, they play the innocent, the overwhelmed, the poor soul who just can't figure it out. And suddenly, you are the one doing all the work, solving all the problems, carrying all the weight. They say, I'm just not good at this. When faced with basic responsibilities, they ask for help with things they've done 100 times before. They forget important tasks, then look to you to rescue them. Their charm lies in their timing. They seem so sincere, so sweet, so lost, that refusing to help feels cruel. And so, you help, again and again, until helping becomes enabling, and their helplessness becomes your burden. But this isn't genuine vulnerability, it's manipulation in disguise, because while they seem incapable in some areas, they're strangely competent when it benefits them. They can navigate complex excuses, manipulate emotions, and dodge accountability like a professional. It's not that they can't, it's that they won't, as long as someone else will do it for them. Fake helplessness drains your energy, your time, and your sense of fairness. You become resentful but too guilty to speak up. You're not helping anymore, you're being used, and while they sit comfortably in the safety of not knowing how, you're the one quietly falling apart, trapped under the weight of responsibilities they were never too helpless to handle. Weaponizing silence in arguments. Weaponizing silence in arguments is a manipulative tactic that turns absence into punishment and silence into power. It's not the healthy space that allows emotions to settle. This silence is sharp, calculated, and cold. It's the moment you finally speak your truth and they respond with nothing, no words, no reaction, just a blank wall where a human connection should be. And in that hollow space, the real damage begins. The manipulator doesn't yell, they don't explain, they disappear, sometimes physically, sometimes emotionally. You're left staring at someone who refuses to acknowledge your pain, your words, or even your existence. It's not because they don't know how to respond, it's because they want you to feel unworthy of one. Their silence isn't emptiness, it's dominance. It says, you don't matter enough for a response. The effect is devastating. You question whether you were too harsh, too emotional, too much. You begin talking to fill the silence, apologizing for things that weren't wrong, bending yourself into smaller and smaller versions just to get a reaction. This isn't resolution, it's emotional starvation, designed to make you beg for scraps of connection. And when they finally do speak, it's on their terms. Once they've made you suffer long enough to regain control, the message becomes clear. Speak up, and you'll be ignored. Disagree, and you'll be exiled. Over time, you begin to self-silence just to avoid the unbearable void. Weaponized silence isn't quiet. It screams, "You don't get a voice here," and the echo of that scream stays long after the room has gone still. Telling others someone is crazy. Telling others someone is crazy is a vicious manipulation tactic known as preemptive character assassination. It's not just gossip, it's a strategy, a way to discredit, isolate, and weaken someone before they even get a chance to speak. The manipulator carefully plants seeds of doubt in the minds of friends, family, co-workers, anyone who might one day believe your side of the story. She's really emotional. He's paranoid. You never know what you're going to get with them. They smile as they say it, their voice soft, their tone concerned. But make no mistake, it's calculated. They paint you as unstable not because you are, but because they need you to be seen that way. That way, if you ever expose their lies, their cruelty, their abuse, it's already too late. No one will believe you. They've rewritten your reputation before you've even opened your mouth. The moment you speak your truth, they'll nod smugly and say, "See, I told you." This tactic doesn't just ruin your relationships, it attacks your sanity. You start wondering if people are looking at you differently. You become afraid to react, afraid to cry, afraid to be angry, because every emotion becomes ammunition for their case against you. Your authenticity becomes a liability. The pain of being called crazy is more than social. It's existential. It erodes your reality, isolates you from your support system, and forces you to live in a constant state of defense. And all the while, the manipulator plays the calm, rational victim, winning sympathy while watching you unravel under the weight of a lie they planted in silence. Repeating lies until believed. Repeating lies until believed is a manipulation tactic as sinister as it is effective, one that uses persistence, not proof, to bury the truth. It's the slow, grinding erosion of reality through sheer repetition. The manipulator doesn't need facts, evidence, or logic. They only need time. Because if a lie is told often enough, with enough conviction, even the most grounded person begins to wonder, what if they're right? What if I'm wrong? At first, the lie seems absurd. You resist, you challenge it, but they keep saying it over days, weeks, months. You're too emotional. You always ruin things. No one else would ever put up with you. And eventually, your defenses wear thin, not because the lie makes sense, but because hearing it over and over again breaks down your trust in yourself. You stop arguing. You start internalizing. You begin to believe. This tactic is mental programming. The manipulator knows that the human brain is wired to find patterns and seek consistency. And if the lie is consistent enough, your mind will reshape itself to accommodate it. That's how gaslighting begins. That's how emotional abuse is cemented. Not in loud moments, but in quiet, relentless ones. Lies repeated until they echo in your own thoughts, in your own voice. The cruelty lies in how subtle it feels. No violence, no screaming, just repetition, like water dripping onto stone, until it carves a scar so deep it feels like truth. And by the time you realize what's happened, you don't just have to fight the manipulator, you have to fight the version of you they built inside your head. Faking vulnerability. Faking vulnerability is one of the most manipulative tactics a person can use because it disguises control as connection. It's the act of imitating emotional openness, not to build trust, but to win it, weaponize it, and ultimately use it to disarm you. Real vulnerability comes with humility, risk, and depth. But when it's faked, it becomes a performance, crafted to make you lower your guard open your heart and hand over your empathy without ever realizing it was a trap. The manipulator might cry, they might confess a traumatic past, they might share their darkest secret, voice their insecurities, or claim they've never trusted anyone the way they trust you. And in that moment, you feel honored, needed, safe. But it's not a bond, it's bait, because the very vulnerability they offer is often scripted, selective, or exaggerated for impact. It's not there to be seen, but to pull you in. And once you're hooked, emotionally invested, softened, loyal, they flip the switch. Suddenly, your needs are too much. Your pain is an inconvenience. Their vulnerability becomes a shield against accountability. You know how hard it is for me, they say, every time they hurt you. They use their story to silence yours. Faked vulnerability is emotional fraud. It's designed to exploit your empathy while keeping theirs tightly guarded. It feels intimate, but it's hollow. And the cruelty of it runs deep, because while you opened up honestly, they were only ever acting, not to be loved, but to be believed, so they could take what they wanted without ever having to truly give. Weaponizing kindness. Weaponizing kindness is one of the most deceptive and emotionally disorienting manipulation tactics because it uses warmth not as an act of love, but as a leash. The manipulator isn't being kind to nurture or connect. They're being kind to control, to confuse, to keep you tethered just tightly enough that you question the pain they cause. They give just enough affection, just enough praise, just enough help to keep you doubting whether what you're experiencing is even abuse. One day, they bring you coffee just the way you like it. They compliment you, offer to help with errands, kiss your forehead and whisper, "You mean the world to me." The next day, they belittle you, ignore your needs, or tear down your self-worth with a single sentence. But before you can even process the harm, they flood you again with generosity and softness, a gift, a favor, a smile, and suddenly you're the one who feels guilty for being upset. That's the trap. Kindness becomes currency, a bargaining chip, a reason to stay. It softens the edges of their cruelty just enough to make you question whether it was really that bad. But they do so much for me, you think? They're trying. You cling to those sweet moments like life rafts, while ignoring that the same hands that offer help also push you under. Weaponized kindness keeps you off balance. It rewrites love as confusion and teaches you that affection is something you earn by enduring pain. And when you finally try to leave, they'll turn up the charm, not to change, but to re-hook you, because kindness, in their hands, isn't a gift. It's bait, making others feel paranoid. Making others feel paranoid is a cruel manipulation tactic designed to destabilize your sense of safety, trust, and reality. It's not just about planting fear. It's about making you live in fear, constantly questioning your surroundings, your relationships, and even your own mind. The manipulator creates an environment where nothing feels secure, and every glance, silence, or delay feels like proof that something is wrong, even if there's no evidence at all. They do it subtly at first. A cryptic comment, you'd be shocked what people say about you when you're not around. A smirk when you ask a question. A conveniently accidental mention of secrets you never shared. Suddenly, your heart races when your phone buzzes. You reread conversations for hidden meanings. You wonder who you can trust and what you've done wrong, even though nothing has happened. That's the brilliance of it. They don't have to accuse you. They just create the atmosphere. They'll deny ever trying to make you feel this way. You're overthinking, they'll say. You're so paranoid. And that only makes it worse because now your fear is not only growing, it's being mocked. The more you question, the more you isolate yourself. And the manipulator watches, silent and smug, as you unravel from the inside. This tactic is psychological poisoning. It robs you of peace, corrodes your connections, and forces you to live in a constant state of hypervigilance. You're not just looking over your shoulder, you're looking inward, doubting your thoughts, your feelings, your reality. And that's exactly what they want, because a paranoid mind is an occupied mind, and an occupied mind is easier to control. Spreading rumors. Spreading rumors is a manipulative act of social sabotage, an intentional, underhanded assault on your reputation designed to isolate, humiliate, and control you without ever laying a hand. The manipulator doesn't confront you directly. Instead, they infect the air around you with whispers, quiet enough to deny, loud enough to damage. What they say doesn't have to be true, it just has to stick. It starts with subtle hints, planted doubts, twisted truths. I heard she's not as stable as she seems, or he's been acting strange lately, hasn't he? Suddenly, you notice people treating you differently. Less eye contact, forced smiles, unanswered messages. You feel it, but can't prove it. And that's what makes this tactic so insidious. It destroys your sense of community, your social safety, and your confidence, all while the manipulator remains invisible, clean-handed, and often sympathetic in the eyes of others. They might frame it as concern. I just thought people should know, or pretend innocence. That's not what I said. You're taking it the wrong way. But every rumor is a seed of doubt, and they plant them intentionally, calculating how it will grow, who it will reach, and what it will cost you. And the goal? To isolate you, to discredit you, to make you feel alone so they can regain control. Eventually, you find yourself explaining, defending, proving who you are to people who never questioned you before. That's the trauma of rumors. They don't just attack your name, they force you to fight for it in rooms you didn't even know you were being discussed in. And that fight, it's exhausting, because you're not just battling lies, you're battling the silence that follows them. Playing favorites. Playing favorites is a subtle but deeply scarring manipulation tactic that creates competition, insecurity, and hierarchy, turning relationships into battlegrounds for approval. It's not just about preference, it's about control. The manipulator withholds consistent love or respect and instead distributes it selectively, making others fight for their affection like scraps. Whether it's a parent with children, a boss with employees, or a partner comparing exes, the message is clear. You're replaceable. Be better or be nothing. They praise one person lavishly while ignoring or criticizing you in the same breath. They bring up how someone else never complains, always looks great, or knows how to treat them. The chosen favorite becomes the golden standard, and you, once confident, begin contorting yourself into whatever shape might finally earn their approval. You compete for attention you should never have to beg for. You try harder. You self-destruct quietly. This tactic divides and conquers. It turns siblings against each other, co-workers into enemies, friends into rivals, and all the while, the manipulator stands in the center, feeding on the chaos, enjoying the control they've created, never admitting they engineered the very pain they now appear detached from. The cruelty of playing favorites is its invisibility. It's dismissed as natural preference, just being honest, or nothing personal, but you feel it in your bones, the slow erosion of your worth every time someone else gets the love you're starving for. And the worst part? They could treat you equally. They choose not to, because your desperation keeps them powerful, keeps you chasing, keeps you broken and loyal. Pretending to forget. Pretending to forget is a deceptively quiet manipulation tactic that cloaks malice in absent-mindedness. On the surface, it looks harmless, forgetting a date, a promise, a boundary. But behind the oops and the feigned confusion lies a calculated strategy to dismiss your needs, downplay your worth, and assert dominance without ever raising their voice. It's not a memory issue, it's a power move. They forget your birthday. They accidentally overlook that important thing you told them. They swear you never asked them to stop doing that hurtful thing. And every time you confront them, they respond with an innocent smile or a helpless shrug. I didn't mean to. I just forgot. But it always seems to be the things that matter most to you. your pain, your priorities, your voice. Over time, this selective amnesia becomes an emotional chokehold. You start wondering if you're expecting too much, if you're being unfair for holding them accountable. You begin reminding them constantly, repeating yourself, chasing recognition, and still they forget. But never when it comes to their own needs, never when it serves them. The cruelty in pretending to forget is that it forces you to carry the weight of emotional labor. You become the reminder, the planner, the fixer, and with every forgotten moment, they reinforce the message. What matters to you doesn't matter to me. It's not about memory, it's about dismissing you under the mask of innocence. And each time they pretend not to remember, what they're really saying is, you are forgettable. And that wound lingers far longer than any apology they never intended to give. Creating no-win situations. Creating no-win situations is a psychological trap where every choice you make leads to punishment, shame, or guilt, no matter what you do. It's a manipulation tactic built to keep you stuck, confused, and constantly failing by design. The rules shift without warning. Expectations are unclear until you've already broken them. You are set up to lose again and again until you start believing the lie that you're the problem. Say something? You're too emotional. Stay silent? You're cold and distant. Ask for support? You're needy. Handle it on your own? You're selfish. The manipulator engineers scenarios in which you're forced to pick between betraying yourself or disappointing them. It's not about resolution. It's about control through chaos. The cruelty of this tactic is that it mimics real choices. On the surface, it seems like you have options, but every path is rigged. You find yourself agonizing over how to respond because no matter what you say or do, it will be turned against you. You begin second-guessing everything. You hesitate to speak. You apologize before you even know what you did wrong. It's psychological erosion dressed as decision-making. Over time, this constant state of failure wears you down. You feel powerless, hopeless, and perpetually wrong. That's the goal, to exhaust your spirit so completely that you stop trying altogether. Because if you're always losing, you eventually stop playing. And once you stop fighting for yourself, the manipulator has full control, not through force, but by convincing you that no matter what, you'll never get it right. Invalidating accomplishments. Invalidating accomplishments is a manipulative tactic that slowly crushes your sense of pride, confidence, and personal worth. It doesn't happen with open insults. It happens with dismissive comments, backhanded compliments, and subtle undercutting that turns every success into something unimpressive, lucky, or irrelevant. The manipulator can't stand to see you shine, so they dim the light every time it begins to glow, not with rage, but with a smirk, a shrug, a snide remark. You get a promotion, and they say, "Must have been nice knowing the right people." You finish a difficult project, and they respond, "It wasn't that hard though, right?" You share a dream you achieved, and they say, "That's cute." Or, "Let's see how long it lasts." It's not just what they say, it's how they say it. Tone laced with sarcasm, smiles that don't reach the eyes. You walk away feeling small, confused, like maybe you didn't do anything worth celebrating after all. Over time, this tactic sinks deep into your psyche. You stop sharing your wins. You minimize your own success. You tell others it was nothing because you've been trained to believe it is. They've made sure of it. Every proud moment becomes a quiet one. Every achievement, a secret. And that silence isn't humility, it's survival. Invalidating accomplishments isn't about facts. It's about fear. Their fear of your growth, your independence, your rising sense of self. So they chip away at it, moment by moment, until you no longer recognize how far you've come. And when they finally made you doubt your greatness, they'll pretend they were just being honest. But honesty doesn't feel like shame. It doesn't feel like erasure. Only manipulation does. Pushing buttons intentionally. Pushing buttons intentionally is a manipulation tactic. that turns your vulnerabilities into triggers, your emotions into weapons, and your pain into entertainment. The manipulator doesn't stumble into hurting you. They aim. They study your reactions, learn your scars, and then press precisely where it hurts, not to understand you, but to provoke, control, and destabilize. They know what words will make your stomach twist. They know which insecurities will leave you speechless, which tone will shatter your calm. And when they unleash it, when they mock your trauma, bring up the one thing you asked them not to, or twist your past into a joke, they sit back and watch you fall apart. Then, just as you begin to unravel, they smile and say, "Relax," or "You're too sensitive," as if your pain is the punchline to a joke they never had to own. It's not random, it's intentional. The goal isn't resolution, it's emotional combustion. They want to see you react because every outburst, every tear, every scream becomes proof that you're the unstable one. Meanwhile, they remain cold, controlled, calculated. It's a performance, and your pain is their applause. This tactic breeds exhaustion. It makes you defensive, jumpy, always bracing for the next blow. You stop expressing your feelings, not because they're gone, but because you know they'll be turned against you. And in that silence, they win. Because when someone knows where your deepest wounds are and chooses to dig into them anyway, it's not an accident. It's cruelty, delivered with precision. Exploiting trauma. Exploiting trauma is one of the darkest and most unforgivable manipulation tactics. It's the act of using someone's deepest wounds, their most painful memories, not to support or protect them, but to control, silence, or break them. It begins with false intimacy. The manipulator gently coaxes you into opening up about your past, abuse, abandonment, grief, betrayal. You share it because you trust them. You need to believe they're safe. But to them, your trauma is not sacred. It's ammunition. They listen carefully. They nod. They ask questions. They study the cracks in your voice. And once they know where it hurts, they store it like a weapon. At first, they may seem comforting, but slowly, they begin to twist your pain against you. "No wonder you're like this after everything you've been through," they'll say. Or worse, "This is why no one else can deal with you." What once felt like understanding now feels like exposure. They use your trauma to gaslight you. Are you sure this isn't just your past, making you paranoid? They use it to isolate you. You're too damaged for anyone else to love. And they use it to justify their own cruelty, because how could you, someone so broken, ever judge them? Over time, you start shrinking back into your pain, afraid to speak, afraid to need, afraid to trust anyone again. Because when someone takes your deepest scar and uses it as a leash, they don't just manipulate your mind, they re-traumatize your soul. And the betrayal cuts so deep because it didn't come from an enemy. It came from someone who pretended to care. Blaming mental health. Blaming mental health is a cruel manipulation tactic that turns a deeply personal struggle into an excuse, a diversion, or a weapon. The manipulator hides behind diagnoses, symptoms, or emotional instability, not to seek healing, but to deflect accountability, silence criticism, and twist empathy into immunity. It's not about vulnerability. It's about power cloaked in pain. They lash out and then say, "You know how my anxiety gets." They ghost you and blame depression, lie and blame trauma, control you and call it insecurity. The conversation ends before it begins, because how dare you hold them accountable when they're struggling? You start feeling selfish for being hurt. You question your right to speak up. Their pain becomes bigger than yours, even when they're the one who caused it. This tactic works because you care. You want to be understanding, supportive, patient, and they exploit that. They hijack the language of healing, presenting themselves as fragile and broken, when in truth they are fully capable, just unwilling to take responsibility. Worse, they often weaponize your concern against you. "You don't care about my mental health," they'll accuse, After crossing a line you had every right to defend. Over time, you start shrinking. You walk on eggshells. You stop expressing your needs because theirs always feel more urgent. And deep down, you begin to wonder if maybe you are the selfish one. But you're not, because real mental health struggles don't excuse harm. They explain it. They invite responsibility, not exemption. And when someone uses their suffering as a shield to hurt you, it's not healing. It's manipulation in its most masked form. Testing loyalty, secretly testing loyalty is a deeply manipulative tactic rooted in fear, insecurity, and a hunger for control. The manipulator doesn't ask for trust. They trap you into proving it. Without warning, they create scenarios, temptations, or false narratives to see if you'll betray them, not because you've done anything wrong, but because they want to watch you squirm, justify, beg, and worst of all, they never tell you it was a test. They may have a friend flirt with you to see how you'll react. They might lie about something just to see if you'll confront them. They ask loaded questions, set emotional landmines, and then wait, hoping you'll trip. And when you don't, there's no apology, no confession, just silence or a smug sense of control that only they understand. These loyalty tests are not about building trust. They're about feeding paranoia, about proving to themselves that they're always in charge. They don't want loyalty earned. They want it performed endlessly, exhaustingly, without end. You start walking on eggshells, terrified that anything you say or do might be interpreted as betrayal. You question your own motives. You become hypervigilant, self-policing, exhausted. And if you fail their secret test, the punishment is swift. Accusations, coldness, emotional withdrawal. You're made to feel disloyal for something you didn't even know you were being judged for. It's psychological entrapment, and it doesn't just poison relationships, it poisons your sense of reality, because eventually you stop asking what's real and start asking what they want you to be, just to feel safe in a love built on fear. Weaponized crying is the calculated use of tears not to express pain, but to divert accountability, manipulate perception, and emotionally hijack a situation. It's not about feeling, it's about controlling how others feel. When someone weaponizes their tears, they flip the script in a heartbeat. You confront them about a boundary they crossed, a lie they told, a hurt they caused, and suddenly they're the one crying, the victim, the wounded, the fragile one in need of comfort. And just like that, your anger feels cruel, your pain is silenced, your truth is buried beneath the sound of their sobs. Others rush in with sympathy, and you're left standing there, confused and vilified, wondering how you became the bad guy for speaking up. The manipulator knows exactly what they're doing. They know that tears draw attention, soften judgment, and make people back down, especially when those tears seem to come from nowhere, timed perfectly with confrontation. This tactic is particularly devastating because it corrupts something inherently human. Tears are meant to express vulnerability, not manufacture it. But weaponized crying turns empathy into control. It creates a shield the manipulator hides behind, a way to escape consequences by making others feel responsible for their emotions, even when they've caused harm. Over time, you may find yourself withholding your needs, walking on eggshells, or avoiding honest conversations altogether, because you know what comes next: the breakdown, the guilt trip, the sudden shift where you end up comforting the person who just hurt you. Weaponized crying doesn't seek healing, it seeks power through pity. And the most dangerous part? It works, not because you're weak, but because you're human. Backhanded compliments. Backhanded compliments are verbal landmines, seemingly sweet on the surface, but loaded with hidden insult and passive aggression. They are the manipulator's way of belittling you while appearing polite, generous, or even supportive. You look great for once. I didn't expect you to pull it off, but good job. Wow, you're actually smarter than you seem. Each word is carefully chosen to bruise your confidence without giving you permission to bleed. You hear it, you feel the sting, but when you react, they deny it. I was giving you a compliment, they'll say. Why are you so sensitive? The cruelty lies in the confusion it creates. You start to wonder if you're imagining things, if maybe you should just be grateful for the praise, no matter how twisted it feels. That's the trap. By disguising criticism as flattery, they make your self-doubt feel like the real problem. Over time, backhanded compliments chip away at your self-esteem. You hesitate to celebrate your own achievements. You dread praise because it's always barbed. You find yourself trying to earn real approval from someone who has no intention of ever giving it. It's a game where they get to feel superior, and you're left constantly chasing clarity, wondering whether you were just uplifted or quietly humiliated. This tactic thrives on your silence, your desire to keep the peace, to not make it a thing. But inside, it cuts deep, because compliments aren't supposed to make you feel smaller. And when they do, it's not kindness, it's control, masked in a smile and wrapped in false praise that leaves your confidence bleeding. Exploiting addictions. Exploiting addictions is one of the most predatory and dehumanizing manipulation tactics because it doesn't just target a person's weakness, it feeds it. The manipulator sees the struggle, not with empathy, but with opportunity. They use the addiction, whether to substances, behaviors, approval, or validation, as leverage to control, shame, and keep the person dependent on them instead of healing. It's not compassion. It's captivity disguised as care. They may supply the addiction under the guise of being supportive. They may say, "You're better when you're high," or "I'd rather you do it with me than behind my back." What sounds like understanding is really ownership, because when they become the gatekeeper to your vice, they also become the gatekeeper to your stability. They tighten the grip every time you try to pull away. Other times, they exploit the shame. They use your past against you. No one else would love someone like you. You're a mess without me. They dangle your worst moments like chains around your neck, keeping you small, quiet, and obedient. And when you try to get clean or grow or fight back, they sabotage your recovery with temptation, guilt, or reminders of your failures, because your healing threatens their power. Exploiting addiction isn't just manipulation, it's emotional hostage-taking. It keeps you in a cycle of dependence and despair, where the person hurting you also pretends to be your savior. And as long as they control the thing that controls you, they own you, not because you're weak, but because they've learned how to twist your survival into their advantage. Bait and switch tactics. Bait and switch tactics are a deceptive form of manipulation where what you're promised is never what you actually receive. It starts with allure, charm, and convincing assurances. You're lured in with warmth, love, opportunity, or support, only to have the offer vanish once you're invested. What once felt like stability suddenly transforms into confusion, obligation, or betrayal. And by then, it's too late. You're already hooked. In relationships, they show up with romance, deep listening, and promises of commitment. "I would never hurt you," they say. "You're exactly what I've been looking for." But once your walls are down, the tone shifts. Affection turns cold, promises get rewritten, boundaries are pushed, and when you question it, they act like you misunderstood, like you expected too much. "I never said that," they claim, gaslighting you for holding them to the version of themselves they deliberately presented. In the workplace, it might come as a job offer that promises flexibility and growth until you've signed the contract, and suddenly you're drowning in unpaid overtime, impossible demands, and shifting expectations. In friendships, it's the emotional reciprocity they showed early on, replaced later with selfishness and control. The pain of bait and switch isn't just in the loss, it's in the betrayal of belief. You weren't lied to outright. You were led there slowly, lovingly, and intentionally. And the worst part? When you call it out, They label you as ungrateful, sensitive, or unstable for noticing the change. This tactic doesn't just break trust, it poisons your ability to trust again. Because how do you know what's real when love was used as the hook and deceit was always the plan? Mocking boundaries. Mocking boundaries is a manipulation tactic that doesn't just ignore your limits, it ridicules them. It's the act of turning your emotional, physical, or psychological needs into a joke, a burden, or an overreaction. The manipulator hears your no and laughs. They see your line in the sand and step over it, not just to violate your space, but to prove that your voice holds no weight. You ask them not to bring up a painful topic, and they bring it up with a smirk in front of others. You express discomfort about a behavior, and they mimic your tone in mockery. Oh no, don't say that, it triggers them. They call you too sensitive, controlling, dramatic for simply asserting yourself. It's not just disrespect, it's humiliation designed to teach you a lesson. Your boundaries are not welcome here. This tactic doesn't just break trust, it erodes identity. It trains you to question your own needs, to see your limits as flaws. You start minimizing your discomfort, convincing yourself that maybe you are being unreasonable. You stay quiet to avoid the eye rolls, the sarcastic remarks, the subtle digs that sting harder than outright insults. Mocking boundaries is about dominance. It's how manipulators maintain control while making you look like the problem. It sends a clear, cruel message. Your comfort is laughable, your safety negotiable, and your dignity disposable. And the longer you stay, the more you learn to laugh along, because fighting for yourself starts to feel more painful than swallowing the disrespect. But inside, it kills you, because you know you deserve to be heard, not mocked. Emotionally abandoning. During crises, emotionally abandoning someone during a crisis is a devastating manipulation tactic that delivers its pain not through what is done, but through what is withheld. In your darkest hour, when you're raw, frightened, and reaching out for support, they vanish, not physically, but emotionally. They go silent, cold, detached. Suddenly, the person who claimed to love you the most becomes unreachable by choice. You're crying, breaking, unraveling, and they respond with a shrug, a sigh, or worse, nothing at all. They minimize your suffering, redirect the focus, or walk away mid-conversation. And when you call it out, they deflect. You're too much. I didn't know how to help. You always make everything about you. Your pain becomes an inconvenience. Your vulnerability becomes a burden. And your fear is met not with comfort, but with apathy. This abandonment doesn't just hurt, it shatters trust. In the moments you need them most, they show you who they truly are. Not your anchor, not your safe place, but someone who only shows up when things are easy. Their love is conditional, their presence transactional. They're only available when your suffering doesn't demand anything real from them. The wound cuts deeper because they often return once the storm has passed, expecting everything to be normal. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a hollow, "I was busy," or "you were being dramatic." But deep down, you remember that silence, that cold distance, that terrifying moment when the one person you needed most watched you drown and chose to look away. Not because they couldn't save you, but because they never intended to. Faking crisis for attention. Faking a crisis for attention is a disturbingly manipulative tactic that preys on compassion, urgency, and fear. It's the deliberate fabrication or exaggeration of personal chaos, an emergency illness, a sudden tragedy, a dramatic breakdown, not for help, but for control. The manipulator doesn't want support. They want focus, sympathy, and to reclaim power in situations where they feel it slipping away. It often happens when you begin to pull back, set boundaries, or speak your truth. Out of nowhere, they spiral. "I think I'm having a breakdown," "I just got terrible news," or "I don't want to live anymore." And suddenly, your pain, your needs, your space, all vanish under the weight of their crisis. You feel guilty for being upset. You drop everything to be there, And that's exactly the point. These crises are often perfectly timed. They erupt when they sense you're gaining strength, about to walk away, or questioning their behavior. It's an emotional reset button designed to reel you back in, cast them as the victim, and blur the lines of accountability. They may even drag others into the performance, building a circle of concern around them, leaving you isolated, silenced, and misunderstood. This manipulation is not only cruel, it's dangerous. It drains your empathy, warps your sense of responsibility, and turns care into captivity. Over time, you begin to dread their calls, their messages, their sudden catastrophes, because you've learned that every crisis demands a sacrifice, your peace, your boundaries, your voice, and deep down, you know that what they need most isn't help. It's control dressed as suffering. Accidental sabotage. Accidental sabotage is a deceptively cruel manipulation tactic where harm is delivered with a smile and destruction is masked as clumsiness, forgetfulness, or unfortunate timing. The manipulator doesn't directly oppose your goals. They simply interfere with them over and over in ways that seem innocent until the pattern becomes undeniable. They're never openly hostile, but somehow things always go wrong when you're about to succeed. You study hard, and they interrupt your sleep the night before the exam. You have an important meeting, and they accidentally take your car keys. You ask for support, and they agree, then forget. You get a promotion, and they joke in front of your boss about how lazy you are. And when you confront them, they blink wide-eyed and say, "It was just a mistake. You're overthinking. I was trying to help." Every wreckage is washed in innocence. The genius of accidental sabotage is its deniability. You begin to question whether you're imagining it. You don't want to accuse someone of malice when they keep insisting it was just bad timing. But deep down, you feel it, that sinking realization that someone you trust is quietly undercutting you, not to protect you, but to keep you small. This kind of sabotage isn't clumsy. It's calculated. It keeps you dependent, discouraged, and doubting yourself. It forces you to keep explaining your failures while they get to play the well-meaning bystander. And each accident chips away at your momentum until you stop striving at all, not because you're incapable, but because someone else made sure you never quite got there. Holding people to double standards. Holding people to double standards is a manipulative tactic rooted in entitlement and domination, where the rules that apply to you never seem to apply to them. It's not about fairness, it's about control. The manipulator creates a world where their mistakes are forgivable, their moods justifiable, their boundaries sacred, while yours are dissected, dismissed, or outright denied. They get to raise their voice, but if you do it, you're too emotional. They can cancel plans, but if you try to take space, you're avoiding responsibility. They can lie, lash out, or forget important details, and it's always a bad day, stress, or not that serious. But when you fall short, you're selfish, immature, toxic. The double standard isn't just unfair, it's dehumanizing. This tactic keeps you constantly chasing approval, walking a tighter rope than they'll ever have to balance. You bend, you apologize, you overcorrect, not to grow, but to survive. You begin internalizing the belief that you're the problem, that their privilege to behave badly is somehow earned, while you must prove again and again that you're worthy of basic respect. The emotional damage runs deep. You lose your voice because speaking up gets flipped back on you. You stop asking for the same treatment because it feels like too much. And the manipulator, they thrive in this imbalance, because as long as they can be the exception to every rule, they never have to change. Double standards aren't accidents. They're structures, carefully built to elevate one person while exhausting the other. And once you see the pattern, it's impossible to unsee. You were never treated equally because they never believed you were. Using silence as power. Using silence as power is a manipulative tactic that turns absence into dominance, not to create space, but to assert control without uttering a single word. It's the quiet, calculated withholding of attention, emotion, or acknowledgement, done not out of peace, but punishment. The manipulator retreats, not because they're overwhelmed, but because they know you can't stand the void they leave behind. You speak, and they look away. You cry, and they stare through you. You beg for clarity, resolution, anything, and they offer a wall of indifference. The silence isn't passive, it's active, sharp, and weaponized. Every unanswered message, every blank stare, every delayed response says the same thing. You don't matter until I decide you do. This silence is used to provoke anxiety, to make you spiral with self-doubt, to leave you pacing, replaying, apologizing for emotions that were never wrong. The manipulator knows that the absence of sound is louder than any scream because it forces you to fill in the blanks with guilt, fear, and desperation. You end up apologizing just to stop feeling invisible. Over time, this tactic trains you to fear confrontation, to silence your own needs, to beg for scraps of attention. It rewires your nervous system to respond to distance like danger and connection like reward. And in that loop, the manipulator controls every beat of the emotional rhythm, deciding when you suffer and when you breathe. Using silence as power isn't maturity, it's domination without words, and its cruelty lies not in what's said, but in what is intentionally never said at all. Insincere mirroring is a manipulative tactic that cloaks itself in connection. It's the act of deliberately copying your interests, values, speech patterns, and emotional energy, not out of genuine alignment, but to gain your trust, hook your attention, and infiltrate your defenses. At first, it feels like magic. You meet someone and suddenly, they love everything you love. They finish your sentences, share your passions, echo your pain. You think, finally, someone who understands me. But what you're really seeing isn't compatibility, it's calculation. They're not bonding with you, they're becoming you. They study your desires, your fears, your wounds, and reflect them back with eerie precision. It feels intimate, even fated. That's the trap. The more seen you feel, the more deeply you invest, and they know it. Once you're attached, emotionally, romantically, financially, the mirroring stops. Their mask begins to slip. Suddenly, they don't care about the things you love. They contradict beliefs they once claimed as their own. You're left confused, wondering if you changed or if they did. But they never changed. They were never real. This tactic is especially cruel because it exploits your most vulnerable parts, the pieces of you that long to be understood, to be matched. It gives you the illusion of soul-deep connection, then pulls it away, leaving you emotionally betrayed and psychologically disoriented. You weren't loved, you were studied, imitated, and used, and the reflection you fell for wasn't them at all. It was your own echo, mirrored back with a smile that was never honest. Offering false hope. Offering false hope is a manipulation tactic that doesn't break your heart with cruelty. It breaks it with promises. It's the slow, deliberate feeding of dreams that were never meant to come true. The manipulator uses words like rope, dangling them just close enough to keep you reaching, believing, waiting. I'm going to change. We'll get there soon. I just need a little more time. But that time never comes, and they know it. You stay in the relationship because they swear they'll commit. You keep quiet at work because your promotion is on the horizon. You endure the pain because things will get better. They don't fight your frustration. They calm it with visions of a future that always feels just out of reach. And the cruelest part? It's not the absence of change. It's the illusion of it. Just enough progress to keep you hanging on. Just enough tenderness to make you question walking away. False hope is not a delay. It's a cage. It turns your loyalty into leverage. It teaches you to sacrifice the present for a version of the future that only exists in their words. And as you wait for love, for growth, for stability. They feed off your patience, your faith, your ache to believe them one more time. Eventually, the realization hits. They never planned on delivering. They just needed you to believe they would, because your belief kept them in control. False hope doesn't just hurt, it devastates. It convinces you to stay in places that are slowly killing you, all for a promise that was never real to begin with. Just being honest, cruelty. Just being honest. Cruelty is manipulation dressed in brutal truth, where cruelty hides behind the mask of transparency. The manipulator delivers cutting remarks, unkind judgments, or unsolicited opinions, not to help but to hurt, all while claiming moral high ground. I'm just being honest, they say, as if honesty absolves them of empathy. But what they're really doing is weaponizing truth to wound you. They tell you your outfit makes you look bigger, that your dreams are unrealistic, or that your personality is too much, and when your face falls or your voice shakes, they shrug. I'm just telling it like it is. In their eyes, your pain becomes proof that you can't handle the truth, that you're weak, overly sensitive, dramatic. But honesty without compassion is cruelty. And these comments aren't offered with care or timing. They're fired like bullets in moments when you're most vulnerable. The manipulator claims to be straightforward, but in reality, they cherry-pick truths that cut deepest. It's not about clarity. It's about control through shame. This tactic keeps you on edge. You start questioning yourself, shrinking yourself, tiptoeing around their sharp tongue just to avoid being dissected again. And when you try to set a boundary, they laugh. Wow, you really can't take honesty. Over time, you stop expressing joy, hope, or even opinions because everything becomes ammunition. And while they keep pretending they're doing you a favor, what they're really doing is silencing you with a smirk. Because in the end, just being honest was never about truth. It was about power, disguised as virtue, delivered without mercy. Sudden coldness after affection. Sudden coldness after affection is a psychological whiplash tactic designed to keep you emotionally unbalanced, craving validation, and constantly second-guessing your worth. It begins with warmth so real, so vivid, you feel seen, chosen, adored. They text you sweet things in the morning. They touch you softly, call you special, make you feel like the center of their world. You sink into it, trusting the connection, believing the tenderness is safe, earned, mutual. And then, without warning, it vanishes. The texts stop, the touch becomes distant, their tone turns flat. You go from being their priority to feeling invisible overnight. No explanation, no argument, just a haunting silence where there was once light. You replay every word, every moment, wondering what went wrong. You blame yourself. You chase their attention, apologize for things you didn't do, shrink just to earn back their warmth. This emotional pendulum isn't accidental. It's engineered. They give love like a drug, then rip it away to make you dependent. You don't just miss them, you miss the version of yourself that felt alive in their affection. And in that ache, they gain control. You become willing to compromise, to overextend, to endure things you once said you never would, just for a taste of that sweetness again. This cycle creates addiction, not to the person but to the highs and lows, the thrill of being wanted, and the gut-wrenching fear of being discarded. It keeps you hooked, confused, and desperate, because the moment you think you're safe in their arms, they go cold, and you're left shivering in the shadow of a love that never intended to stay. Weaponizing shared memories. Weaponizing shared memories is a devastating manipulation tactic that turns your most intimate, vulnerable moments into tools of control. These are the memories you once held close. Late-night confessions, joyful milestones, tear-filled conversations, things you thought were sacred. But in the hands of a manipulator, they're not cherished. They're stockpiled. And when the time is right, they are used not to bond with you, but to break you. They'll bring up your past pain, not to comfort you, but to shame you. Remember when you begged me not to leave? Don't forget who picked you up when you had no one. They'll remind you of your darkest moments, your mistakes, your trauma, but only to prove a point or reinforce your dependence. Even happy memories aren't safe. We were perfect once, they'll say, when you're finally ready to walk away. You really want to throw that all away? They trap you in nostalgia, in guilt, in emotional debt. You begin to feel owned by your history with them, as if leaving would erase it, betray it, destroy everything that was once real. That's the trick. They don't need to create new control. They just reach into the past and weaponize what you trusted them with. And it works, because part of you still treasures those moments, even if they don't. Over time, the memories that once made you feel loved now feel like shackles, not because they weren't real, but because they've been twisted into reminders of who you used to be, who you're expected to stay, and what you'll lose if you finally choose yourself. Compulsive competitiveness. Compulsive competitiveness is a manipulative trait disguised as ambition, but underneath the surface, it's driven by insecurity, control, and a toxic need to dominate every interaction. To someone like this, life isn't a shared journey. It's a relentless scoreboard. They don't want to grow with you. They want to outdo you. Your achievements become threats, your joy a challenge, your struggles an opportunity to win by comparison. At first, it might seem playful, a joke here, a smug comment there, but over time, every conversation becomes a contest. You get a promotion, they casually mention they turned down something bigger. You share a personal success, they immediately one-up it, or worse, downplay it. If you're hurting, they hurt more. If you're excited, they're already ahead. There's no moment where your win is just yours, because they can't stand not being the center of excellence. What makes this manipulation so exhausting is that it's relentless. Nothing is off limits. Not careers, not parenting, not friendships, not even trauma. They compete in sorrow and suffering just as eagerly as in joy. And if they're not winning, they're sulking, mocking, or subtly sabotaging your light. Over time, you stop sharing your successes. You shrink yourself to avoid triggering their envy. You pretend things don't matter to you so they don't try to take them away. And in doing so, you lose more than confidence. You lose connection. Because with someone who is compulsively competitive, there's no space for mutual celebration, only a constant, unspoken threat that no matter what you do, it will never be allowed to shine. Not brighter than them, not even for a moment. Narcissistic mirroring. Narcissistic mirroring is a manipulative seduction tactic designed not to connect with you, but to capture you. The narcissist studies you like prey, your dreams, your wounds, your humor, your rhythm, and reflects it all back to you in perfect, intoxicating symmetry. You feel seen, understood, even spiritually matched. It's as if you found your soulmate, but what you're really seeing is a projection. Yourself, refracted through the narcissist's calculated charm. They adopt your interests. They mimic your language. They agree with your values, your opinions, your pace. In the early stages, it feels euphoric, effortless compatibility, rapid bonding, deep conversations that seem to skip past surface. You think, how can someone understand me this well, this fast? The answer is, they don't. They're not bonding. They're building a disguise. This imitation creates intense emotional intimacy, but it's a false one, because once you're invested, once you've fallen for the image, they begin to shift. The mask drops, the empathy fades, the attention withdraws. You realize that the version of them you loved never actually existed. It was you mirrored back for the purpose of drawing you in. What makes narcissistic mirroring so cruel is that it hijacks the very parts of you that crave connection. You opened your heart, not to a partner, but to a hollow reflection. You weren't loved for who you are. You were used because of who they pretended to be. And when you finally question it, they twist the narrative, blame your expectations, and leave you doubting the most sacred truth, your own ability to recognize real love from a mirror made of lies. Spiritual bypassing. Spiritual bypassing is a manipulation tactic that disguises emotional avoidance and control in the language of enlightenment. It's the act of using spiritual concepts like forgiveness, surrender, detachment, and positivity to silence pain, dismiss conflict, and invalidate real human experiences. It sounds peaceful, it sounds wise, but it's not about growth. It's about escape. And when used to manipulate, it becomes a polished cage cloaked in the illusion of higher consciousness. You express hurt, and they respond with, "You're just not aligned." You set a boundary, and they call it ego. You get angry, and they tell you your vibration is low. They quote mantras and drop scripture, not to comfort, but to correct, to silence, to make you feel like your emotions are a spiritual failure rather than a natural response to being mistreated. And worst of all, they position themselves as above it all, untouched, pure, awakened, while you're left drowning in shame, wondering why your pain isn't holy enough to be honored. Spiritual bypassing doesn't heal wounds, it buries them. It tells you that suffering is a sign of weakness, that trauma is something to transcend, not feel. And when used as a manipulation tactic, it keeps you stuck in cycles of abuse, convincing you that speaking up is negative, that fighting for yourself is unspiritual. The cruelty lies in its mask, because when manipulation sounds like wisdom, it's harder to fight. You don't want to seem unenlightened. You don't want to lose the peace they dangle above you. But peace without truth isn't peace, it's denial. And in the hands of a manipulator, even your soul becomes a battlefield where your silence is framed as virtue. Setting traps in conversation. Setting traps in conversation is a manipulative tactic where the manipulator carefully crafts questions, phrases, or narratives that are designed not to understand you, but to catch you. It's a psychological setup. They bait you into revealing something, reacting emotionally, or contradicting yourself, then use your response as evidence to shame, discredit, or guilt you. It's not about communication. It's about control through entrapment. They'll say, "Be honest with me," with eyes that already judge. Or, "You can tell me the truth, I won't get mad." But the moment you open up, they twist your words, react explosively, or bring it up later as ammunition. Other times, they ask questions they already know the answer to, just to see if you'll slip up. They build traps from your past statements, hold you to impossible consistency, and expect you to defend things you never meant in the way they've decided you did. These conversations leave you breathless, not because of what you said, but because of how easily it was turned against you. You start replaying every word, terrified of saying the wrong thing next time. You hesitate before answering even the simplest question. You go silent, not out of peace, but out of fear. Over time, this tactic erodes your ability to feel safe in dialogue. You stop being honest, not because you want to lie, but because you're being hunted for flaws. The manipulator doesn't want truth. They want leverage. And once you've fallen into enough of their conversational traps, you stop trusting your own voice, because it's no longer a tool for connection. It's a trigger waiting to be used against you. Holding on to dirt for later. Holding on to dirt for later is a manipulative tactic rooted in quiet control, where the person collects your vulnerabilities, mistakes, confessions, not to understand or forgive you, but to store them like ammunition. They act supportive when you open up. They nod, listen, comfort you. You think you're being held in safety, but in reality, they're building a silent arsenal, cataloging your weaknesses to unleash when it serves them. When you defy them, challenge them, or try to walk away, they remember everything. The thing you did 5 years ago when you were broken, the message you regretted, the insecurity you once whispered in a moment of pain, and they don't use it in real time. No, they wait. They hold it just out of sight, close to the chest, until you've healed, grown, maybe even forgotten. Then, when you're strong enough to push back or speak your truth, They strike. Oh, really? Because I remember when you did this. And suddenly, you're knocked back down, drowning in shame that no longer belongs to you. This tactic keeps you tethered to your past. It makes growth feel dangerous and honesty feel risky. You stop sharing. You guard yourself. You become afraid of giving someone anything they can twist and throw like a knife later. That's the real goal, to own the narrative, to keep you small, submissive, silenced. Holding onto dirt isn't about memory, it's about manipulation. It's not forgiveness, it's not understanding. It's quiet blackmail, disguised as intimacy. And when it's finally used, it doesn't just reopen old wounds, it makes you bleed in the present for sins you already survived.